Chapter 805. He originally thought that it wouldn't be difficult for the three great influences to work together and borrow the Ice Soul Jade bed, but reality soon taught him a vivid lesson. He could confirm that the Ice Soul Jade bed was indeed in the Beast Trainer Alliance, but they refused to lend it to him. They didn't even give an explanation. If it were only the Western tomb, Qin Yu would have suspected that Ji Xiangtian was playing tricks in the dark. But since Sky Declaring Pavilion and the Dark Parliament both said the same thing, then it had to be true. The problem returned to the starting point. After confirming the information, Qin Yu had Yundai try using the chaotic sky mirror again. But he didn't know if this was the only method or if her strength wasn't enough. So the chaotic sky mirror only gave him this method. As Qin Yu was at his wit's end, another message came from the Dark Parliament. According to the intelligence of the Beast Trainer Alliance, the reason they refused to see the outside world was because the Ice Soul Jade bed had been buried with them in the grave of a high-level Alliance figure. The good news was that this high-level Beast Trainer Alliance member's grave was located in a forbidden land controlled by the Beast Trainer Alliance. And this forbidden land just happened to be about to open soon. However, in order to enter, one first needed to obtain a passage token, and this Jade token was a reward that the top 10 participants of the Beast Trainer tournament could obtain. After spending some time, he finally understood the contents of this message. He raised a hand and pinched his eyebrows. If he couldn't find any other way, then this was his only choice. For the Dark Parliament to pass this information to him, it was clear they believed that with Qin Yu's level as a Beast Trainer, obtaining a passage token wouldn't be difficult at all. But Dorlise had arrived late and hadn't experienced what happened in Dragon City. Although she had heard some things afterwards, it wasn't as real as seeing it with her own eyes. Seeing Qin Yu remain silent, she raised an eyebrow. "Don't tell me you really plan on participating in the Beast Trainer tournament? Although this is the first time I've come to this world, I have some understanding of it. With the standards of the Beast Trainer tournament, it isn't something that can be easily fooled." Yundai finally found an opportunity. She sneered, her face full of pride. "My teacher is a true Beast Trainer Grandmaster. Looking at the entire Sky Declaring Pavilion, no, even the entire world, there might not be anyone who can compare with him. Others might find it extremely difficult to obtain the token in the competition, but to my teacher it's a piece of cake." Dorlise revealed a surprised expression. She looked at Qin Yu and then at him. She directly said, "I really don't see the least bit of a Beast Trainer's aura from you. Are you hiding some other secret, or are you hiding it too well?" Qin Yu pretended not to hear these words. When it came to the existence of the little blue lamp, he wouldn't say a single word about it, even if it was just the tiniest bit. Dorellis' eyes flashed. Her intuition told her that there was something going on here. But before she could think further, Yundai stabbed her with several more words. She was extremely dissatisfied with this woman. Seeing that Qin Yu didn't want to say anything more, Dorlise looked at Yundai. "Little girl, you're trying so hard to prove Qin Yu's reputation. Are you trying to tell me how outstanding he is and that I can't let him go?" "Thank you. I am indeed prepared to do so." Yundai's face flushed red with anger. She clenched her teeth, not saying a single word. When it came to words, she certainly wasn't a match for Dorlise, who had lived for countless years. Qin Yu ended the confrontation between the two women. "I'll try some other methods in the next 2 days. If I can't find anything, then I'll go to the Beast Trainer Alliance." Right now, the only thing he wanted to do was to become stronger in the shortest possible time. If it didn't involve the Chicken Overlord, Qin Yu wouldn't have caused so many problems and wasted his time on something like this. But in the end, he couldn't just watch on helplessly as this fellow died. After all, if he thought about it, they were old friends for many years. Of course, the unreliability of the Chicken Overlord was still very annoying. Qin Yu recorded another line in his account book. Double interest. 3 days later, Qin Yu found Senior Lin and expressed his desire to participate in the Beast Trainer Grand Competition. Senior Lin frowned. He slowly said, "Normally speaking, I shouldn't stop you from doing something like this, but my master is in a hurry. If possible, I would like to ask Mr. Qin to temporarily prioritize this task." Thinking for a moment, he continued to say, "Of course, Sky Declaring Pavilion is willing to compensate Mr. Qin for any negative effects caused." Including today, this was only the third time they had met. But the list that Qin Yu sent over a few days ago had already made Senior Lin believe that he was an insatiably greedy person. He believed that the reason Qin Yu came here was to find an excuse to take another bite. However, as he thought of Qin Yu's appetite, Senior Lin couldn't help but frown. Qin Yu sensed Senior Lin's thoughts and felt a bit embarrassed. After all, this matter was indeed his fault. He lightly coughed and cupped his hands across his chest. "Senior Lin, the reason I am going to participate in the Beast Trainer Grand Competition is not because I care about my personal gains and losses, but because I have no other choice. Several days ago, I asked Senior Lin to help me borrow the Ice Soul Jade bed. This is because I have reached a critical step in my concoction but have been unable to make a breakthrough. If I can use the Ice Soul Jade bed and utilize its effects, I have a 70% chance of finding a solution." Senior Lin's complexion changed. "Mr. Ning Qin, are you speaking the truth?" Qin Yu thought that it was a lie, but if he didn't say this, would Senior Lin let him go? Then he earnestly nodded. Senior Lin stood up and paced back and forth several times. He said in a low voice, "I cannot make a decision on my own. Mr. Ning Qin, please return first. I will give you a reply by tomorrow at the latest." In fact, there was no need to wait until tomorrow. 2 hours later, Senior Lin arrived at the lakeside building once more. After earnestly confirming with Qin Yu that he wasn't making up some random excuse, Senior Lin said, "My family's master has already agreed. Since Mr. Ning Qin needs it, you may go participate. But in order to prevent anyone from harming Mr. Ning Qin in the competition, I will accompany you. Of course, I ask that Mr. Ning Qin rest assured that I will not interfere with any of your personal actions." Qin Yu directly agreed. Senior Lin, following him, didn't exceed his expectations. This was a normal matter. Rather, it showed how highly the Sky Declaring Pavilion Master regarded him. Strictly speaking, this was a good thing. The Beast Trainer Grand Competition was approaching. In fact, half a month ago, Sky Declaring Pavilion had already closed all registrations and had begun internal eliminations. But to Qin Yu, who had obtained the approval of the Sky Declaring Pavilion Master, this wasn't a problem at all. He directly opened a back door and entered the final list. Mr. Shah had already begun to move. Mr. Shah, who had been waiting in despair, obtained the adjusted list in the shortest time possible. His eyes brightened and he laughed out loud. He had waited and waited, and now it was finally time. If Qin Yu had decided not to participate in this Beast Trainer Grand Competition, then all of his preparations would have been for naught. He really would have gone crazy. Luckily, he hadn't made it in time. It was just that Qin Yu had directly entered the final list. This was a bit troublesome, but Mr. Shah had already made all sorts of preparations. He wasn't completely helpless. He smiled and said, "It looks like it's time to begin." Although he shouldered the task of taking care of the chicken overlord, Siyuin was still preparing and waiting. He only had one chance. He couldn't afford to fail. Not too long ago, Siyuin had inadvertently obtained a piece of news. After carefully confirming it, excitement surged in his heart. He knew that the chance he had been waiting for had finally arrived. If everything went smoothly, there was a decent chance he could kill Qin Yu. That was more than enough. Siyuin was well aware that with his cultivation there was no way he wouldn't take risks. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Thus he began to act. He found an excuse and temporarily pushed away the matter of taking care of the chicken overlord. Then he closed his door and recuperated for 2 days. Late at night on the 3rd day, when the darkness was at its thickest, Siyuin opened his eyes. There was no flash of light. Rather, there was only tranquility, and a decisiveness that cut off all paths of retreat. Peng Peng, please watch from the heavens. This person who has always liked you in secret, he is a true man. He can do anything for you. He stood up and carried the bag he had already prepared. The journey was unexpectedly smooth until he arrived at a remote courtyard. Although he had been prepared, with things having reached this step, Siyuan still couldn't help but feel nervous. His heart raced. He cautiously approached the room. He could hear faint panting and moaning in his ears, incomparably seductive. At this moment, Siyuan actually calmed down. He took off the bag he was carrying and opened up the layers of paper wrappings inside. An invisible and odorless aura began to spread out. May the heavens bless me. Before he finished praying in his heart, Siyuan felt a chill run down his back. A wave of pain spread out and his consciousness fell into darkness. In the end, the heavens didn't bless him. When he awoke, Siyuan discovered that he was tied up and his cultivation was completely imprisoned. He had failed. All his hopes turned to dust. Tears flowed down his cheeks. He thought to himself, I'm really useless. I can't even take revenge for you. In fact, it was impossible for Siyuan to accomplish this. This was because, from the very start, the information he obtained was deliberately leaked to him by Shalyoha. Ever since he inadvertently learned that Siyuan and the woman who died beneath him were childhood friends, he investigated the matter, and everything became clear. Shalyoha made some arrangements, and sure enough, this fellow had foolishly jumped into the pit and become a card in his hand. Although his cards weren't too good, this wasn't important. This was only an excuse. He was confident he could make it, so that Qin Yu couldn't avoid it. Soon, an astonishing piece of news spread through the entire mid-morning city branch division. Mr. Shalyoha, who had already entered the final name list and would be representing Sky Declaring Pavilion in the Great Beast Trainer Tournament, had been secretly poisoned by an unknown cultivator. Although he had been discovered in time, Mr. Shah had still been injured by the poison. Before everyone could digest this news, an even more explosive inside story spread out. The one who poisoned Mr. Shalyoha was actually Ning Qin's secret disciple who had just returned. A single stone stirred up 1,000 waves. Because of Shalyoha's sudden rise, the grudge between these two people was already well known to everyone. When Qin Yu first returned, this news had caused an uproar. Simply put, Qin Yu did indeed have the motive and position to attack. Countless eyes gathered on him, all of them having the same thought. There was going to be a lively show to watch. It was indeed a lively show. Shalyoha, who had been poisoned, had brought the murder with him to the Internal Affairs Division, requesting that they capture the true culprit and give him justice. Although he didn't name anyone, everyone knew who he was referring to as the true culprit. For a time, anyone with a certain status began to gather at the Internal Affairs Division. When the news reached the Lakeside building, Yundai didn't dare to delay. She immediately reported this matter to Qin Yu. Teacher, that surname Shah is slandering you. I already knew that he wasn't a good person. She thought back to when she had slapped Shalyoha in the face, and it had even been Yundai herself. She was well aware of just how deep Shalyoha's hatred towards her teacher was. Qin Yu had a calm expression. Are you sure that the one who poisoned him was really Siyuan? Yundai nodded. I have already found someone to confirm it. It was indeed junior apprentice Brother Siyu. She opened her mouth, wanting to speak, but hesitating. Qin Yu glanced at her. If you have something to say, then speak. Yundai said, reporting to teacher, this disciple has heard some news recently that just happens to be related to junior apprentice Brother Siyu. She briefly told him about Siyuan and the woman who was his childhood sweetheart, who is now dead. Shalyoha, during this period of time, several of his disciples have gone missing. They are all young and beautiful women, but because of their lowly statuses and Shalyoha's formidable strength, no one has been able to track them down. This disciple suspects that the disappearance of these female disciples is inextricably linked to that surname Shah. As Yundai spoke to hear, she secretly rejoiced. Luckily, when Sha Liuha had been choosing disciples, she had felt something strange in his eyes and hadn't agreed. Otherwise, she feared she would have suffered the same fate as these female disciples. As Qin Yu was deep in thought, the voice of a disciple came from outside the lakeside building. Jiang Yiyun had sent someone to invite him. Chapter 806. Coming, coming. With a low cry, the crowd quickly quietened down. The Internal Affairs Department was so crowded that even a pin drop could be heard. Everyone looked at the entrance. Jiang Yiyun walked forwards. He cupped his hands together and bowed. Mr. Ning Qin, I must apologize. I will need your cooperation for today's matters. Although he had been forced to ask for Qin Yu, he didn't favor Sha Liuha's chances at all. Jiang Yiyun didn't know the specifics, but he knew of Senior Lin's status. It was impossible for Senior Lin's actions to be completely concealed from him after he arrived at the Mid-Morning City Branch Division. In addition to the fact that the rumors against Qin Yu had been suppressed, it was clear that Senior Lin and Qin Yu had some other relationship. Just based on this point, let alone the fact that today's matter seemed to have been deliberately blown up, even if Qin Yu had really poisoned Sha Liuha was still doomed to be disgraced. You think it's unfair? Haha, there is no such thing as true fairness and justice in this world. Thus, even though he knew that taking the initiative to greet Qin Yu with a smile in front of everyone would cause many people to have other thoughts, Jiang Yiyun couldn't care less. He had to remove himself from the picture and let Qin Yu know that today's events had nothing to do with him. Steward Jiang, long time no see. Qin Yu smiled and nodded. Jiang Yiyun relaxed, and his expression became much friendlier. But since his goal had been achieved, now wasn't the time to speak. He gestured. Mr. Ning Qin, please follow me. Sha Liuha frowned. It seemed that the news he had heard was true. Ning Qin had really received a very important commission from the tower. Jiang Yiyun's performance was the best evidence of this. But in next to no time, his expression returned to normal. After causing such a huge commotion today, it was naturally impossible for him to just let it go. Moreover, as long as he obtained the two women at Ning Qin's side and repaired the hidden dangers within his body, what did it matter if he angered Sky declaring pavilion? As his thoughts raced, he completely calmed down. He looked up and locked his eyes on Qin Yu. He coldly sneered. Ning Qin, I think you need to give me an explanation for this. Putong. Siyuan was thrown to the ground. Although he had changed into a new set of clothes, judging from the mottled bloodstains on his body, it was clear that he had been tortured. His face was deathly pale and his teeth were tightly clenched. His breath was weak and he had already fallen unconscious. Before coming to the Internal Affairs Division, Sha Liuha had wanted to obtain a strong statement from this boy's mouth. But he never thought that this boy's brain would be so hard that he wouldn't admit a single word. But it didn't matter. He was just a nominal disciple, so his words didn't carry much weight. So it was best to have a confession. If he couldn't get it, then so be it. Qin Yu stood still. He lightly said, What explanation does Mr. San want? Sha Liuha pointed a finger. Ning Qin, is this person your disciple? Qin Yu nodded. Yes, as long as you admit it. Sha Liuha sneered again and again. Last night, while I was cultivating, I was poisoned by this person. If it weren't for me sensing something was wrong, I fear I would have become a corpse today. Ning Qin, could it be that this vile matter isn't enough for you to personally explain? Qin Yu had a calm expression. I'm not too clear on this matter, but it seems that Mr. Sha has already interrogated him. I wonder if you have any harvests? The complexions of the several disciples behind Sha Liuha sank. Of course, they wouldn't say that after Siyuan was captured, he had cursed Sha Liuha for treating human lives like grass. He would die a miserable death. This person's mouth is too tight, or perhaps he was threatened, but he refused to spit out a single word. Sha Liuha's eyes exploded with a divine light. Ning Qin, I won't beat around the bush. This is a grudge between us. So if you want to make a move, then do so openly. Playing tricks like this is just too despicable. Moreover, I have already entered the list and will be representing Sky Declaring Pavilion in the Great Beast Trainer Tournament. After being poisoned by your disciple, my strength has already been damaged. This isn't just harming my interests. If this were to spread out, the entire Sky Declaring Pavilion would be laughed at. You have gone too far. Yundai blushed red. What nonsense. Just what sort of status does my teacher have? If he wanted to deal with a loser like you, would he need to play tricks in the dark? Hua, many people were startled. They thought that this little girl was quite brave. She actually dared to berate Sha Liuha to his face. Looking at her flushed face and then at Qinyu, many people's expressions changed. If she didn't have someone to rely on, would a mere little girl dare to act like this? Although this sort of matter wasn't uncommon in the circle of beast trainers, private matters could never be brought to the surface. With Sha Liuha's status, Yundai's current actions couldn't even be described as offensive. This caused many people to look down on Qinyu even more. Sha Liuha was expressionless. I won't lower myself to your level. Draw back. Yundai could feel the cold gazes around her and knew that she had done something wrong. She panicked and blurted out, Surname Sha. Do you think you have entered the list of the Great Beast Trainer Tournament? My teacher is also there, so what right do you have to be so arrogant? In fact, with Yundai's intelligence, her performance today could be called lacking. But when she had slapped Sha Liuha's face, she had acted on her own initiative. Now that he had come knocking on her door, she instinctively felt guilty. She would think that the reason things had reached this step was because of her. Thus, when Sha Liuha attacked her, Yundai had impatiently jumped out and tried to defend her teacher. But she never imagined that her current actions would only make matters worse. Whoosh! Within the Internal Affairs Division, the crowd was in an uproar. Since they knew of Qinyu's relationship with Yundai, they certainly wouldn't doubt her words. But at the Mid-Morning City Branch Division, whether it was the registration process or the screening process, Qinyu hadn't appeared at all. Could this be another black box operation? It was just like how he had suppressed the rumors in the past. Thinking back to Jiang Yiyun's warm and affectionate attitude, everyone fell silent. Their gazes gradually became complex. Yundai nearly cried. She discovered that she had suddenly become so stupid. She wanted to help her teacher, but instead she had made things even more chaotic. Would her teacher hate her? Qinyu patted her shoulder, interrupting her thoughts. He looked up and said, Mr. Sha, what do you want? Just say it. This person was clearly deliberately stirring up trouble. Even if Yundai had 8 mouths, with Siyuan poisoning her first, there was no way she could explain herself. If this was the case, then he might as well get straight to the point. Whatever methods he had, he would accept them all. Sha Liuha's eyes flashed with joy. He had succeeded. Good. Sha Liuha said in a low voice, Ningqin, if you refuse to admit it today, then I truly have no better method. I might as well take this opportunity to thoroughly settle the grudges between us. Today, let's have a fight based on our own abilities. If I win, I'll deal with the 2 women behind you. What do you think? Without waiting for Qinyu to speak, Dorlice charmingly laughed. Didn't you hear? There are still people who know what's good and what's bad in this world. You don't know how to appreciate it, but other people are eagerly hoping to get closer to me. Qinyu was expressionless. Then should I just admit defeat? Dorlice rolled her eyes at him. Since this is a competition, we must use our true abilities. Otherwise, it would be boring. She flirtatiously swept her eyes over Sha Liuha. But you only said half of what you wanted to say just now. If Qinyu loses, you want the 2 of us. But what if you lose? Between his nose and mouth, that alluring scent became even stronger. Sha Liuha's face flushed red. He said, Whatever you say. Dorlice clapped her hands. What a man! She blinked. How about this? If you lose, I'll slap you. How about it? Everyone nearly fainted. They thought that this woman behind Ning Qin was a spy. But what surprised them even more was that Qin Yu had directly agreed to such an absurd agreement. Sha Liuha took a deep breath. I heard that the Internal Affairs Division has 2 precious sand dragon eggs. You and I will each choose one. Whoever can make the sand dragon break out of the shell in the shortest time will be the winner. A sand dragon wasn't a true dragon. It should be considered a relatively rare flood dragon. Because of its bloodline, it might not even be possible for a single sand dragon to hatch from 100 eggs. The Internal Affairs Division's Bien Chonli's complexion changed. Damn you, Shalioha. I was just enjoying the show. So why did you come looking for me? But he immediately had a response. He turned and respectfully said, Steward Jiang, what do you think? Jiang Yiyun secretly sneered. He thought, Shalioha, you really are seeking death. Do you really think you are fierce enough to defeat Ning Qin? Jiang Yiyun swept his eyes over Qin Yu's calm face. He coughed and said, If neither side has any objections, then let's do it this way. The 2 sand dragon eggs were soon taken out. Dorlice approached Qin Yu and breathed into his ear. If you lose, you are dead. Yun Dai's complexion gradually returned to normal. She glanced at Sha Liuha and the others and relaxed. She was well aware that this surname Sha was seeking death. At almost the same time, Sha Liuha laughed inwardly. He thought, Ning Qin, no matter how fierce you are, you will still have to kneel today. He had already prepared himself for the topic he proposed. Although he would have to consume some strength, as long as he could obtain these 2 women, it wouldn't be a problem. On the surface, the 2 sand dragon eggs looked exactly the same whether it was in size or aura. Sha Liuha let Qin Yu choose first. He casually pointed to the one closest to him and said, This one. Sha Liuha sneered. Then let's begin. Qin Yu nodded. But in fact, there was one thing that Dorlice was right about. He was still 108,000 miles away from becoming a true beast trainer. In front of everyone's eyes, Qin Yu really didn't have the ability to speed up the incubation of the sand dragon eggs. But he didn't panic. Qin Yu looked at the sand dragon egg in front of Sha Liuha without expression. Sha Liuha moved. With a flick of his sleeves, massive runes appeared in the void, directly condensing into a complex array disk. The crowd gasped, disregarding everything else. Just this method of forming an array formation from the void was enough to blind one's eyes. Besides cultivation, only someone who had immersed themselves in the path of beast trainers for many years and whose skills had reached the peak could casually accomplish this. Without the aid of external objects, one could rely on their own strength to complete the complex breeding process. Without any pause, Sha Liuha took out several items one after another. Some were burned with flames, some were washed with water, and the same void array formation was being processed at the same time. There was another round of gasps. This time, awe appeared in the eyes of the crowd. They originally thought that Mr. Sha's usual performance was already amazing, but they never imagined he was still hiding something. Chapter 807. Those that were originally optimistic about Sha Liuha immediately realized that in the first test several months ago, Mr. Sha had been absolutely careless. Otherwise, with his level, how could he have failed and been trampled to the ground, ending up in such a humiliating state? But today, Mr. Sha had clearly come to wash away his shame. It was Yun Dai who had personally slapped him in the face. If Ning Qin were to be defeated today, that little girl's fate wouldn't be too wonderful. There was also another young woman with long legs and large breasts. Just thinking about it made one's nose bleed. Sha Liuha was also excited. Moreover, he was far more excited than anyone else present. How many years had it been? He had bitterly persisted until today. As long as he could win, he could obtain these 2 women and end the pain that had haunted him for countless years, allowing him to obtain a new life. Sha Liuha swore that no one would be able to stop him. Perhaps it was because his mind was surging with excitement, but he felt his condition was unprecedentedly good. Soon. Within the void array formation, the required materials had already been tempered. Sha Liuha controlled them and began to fuse them together. Everything went surprisingly smoothly. "Break for me." With a loud roar, Sha Liuha lifted a finger, startling many beast trainers who were watching in a daze. As they watched the translucent liquid condense within the void array formation and fall onto the surface of the eggshell where it was directly absorbed, everyone gasped in praise. This speed, this level. Mr. Sha was simply too amazing. Kacha! A light sound spread into everyone's ears. A crack appeared on the sand dragon egg in front of them. It was about to come out. Victory and defeat had been decided so quickly. There was a feeling as if it would end before it had even begun. This was still not enough. Sha Liuha couldn't suppress the joy in his heart. A carefree smile lit up his face. If it weren't for the fact that he still had some reason left in him, he really would have reared his head back and shouted several times to vent the excitement in his heart. At this time, Chinyu, who had been ignored by everyone, suddenly moved. In truth, what he did was very simple. He turned his head and glanced at the cracking sand dragon egg. In the next moment, everyone's eyes widened. This was because they could sense that the increasingly strong life force within the sand dragon egg was rapidly weakening. Then, without giving anyone time to react, like a candle being blown out, it completely vanished. The Internal Affairs Division was deathly silent. Everyone present, whether they were beast trainers or not, knew what this meant. The concoction failed, but that wasn't right. They had personally witnessed the entire process of Sha Liuha's configuration, so there was absolutely no problem. The little salon had clearly been awakened and possessed a large amount of vitality. It was about to break out of its shell. So why did it suddenly die? But the truth was right before their eyes. The salon that hadn't even hatched yet died. It died just like that. As everyone was in a trance, they suddenly heard Qin Yu's voice in their ears. "Then, I should have won this contest." Everyone's jaws dropped open. As they looked at the calm Qin Yu, although they thought this was incomparably funny, this was clearly the truth. It was only now that everyone discovered that from start to finish, Qin Yu hadn't done anything at all. His sand dragon egg was still the same as when he took it out. But he still won because Sha Liuha's sand dragon egg had been destroyed while his was still full of vitality. Looking at the calm Qin Yu, a thought suddenly drilled into everyone's mind. Did he already know this would happen? After pondering for a moment, everyone felt a chill in their hearts. If that was really the case, then Ning Qin's strength was probably far greater than they had imagined. Despicable. "Ning Qin, what did you do?" Sha Liuha roared, his eyes red. He felt as if he had been played with. Looking at Qin Yu and then at the distant Jiang Yun, Sha Liuha felt that he had grasped some sort of truth. There was no need for words. Just a few glances were enough to reveal enough information. The complexions of everyone in the Internal Affairs Division changed once more. Could this really be the case? Jiang Yun was a smart and capable man. For him to reach his current position, he certainly wasn't someone easy to deal with. He immediately realized that something was wrong. He loudly said, "The method of competition was proposed by Mr. Sha himself. I can guarantee that no one will interfere. I can use my own reputation to guarantee this." Many people present were well aware of Jiang Yun's character. He was an absolutely shrewd person who wouldn't stir up trouble for himself. Since he said this, there shouldn't be any problems with today's matter. Otherwise, if it were to be exposed in the future, his position as a steward would come to an end. Sha Liuha clenched his teeth, his complexion pale. He was sure that there wasn't a problem with his configuration and that someone must have tampered with it. But it was useless if he couldn't produce any evidence. He had lost. It was the same as last time. He was clearly confident in himself. But without any warning, he was knocked to the ground. This surname Ning was truly strange. Before this, Sha Liuha believed that he could obtain Yin Dai and Dorlease, so he certainly didn't fear falling out with Sky declaring pavilion. But now that the situation had changed, he couldn't do this. He had already failed today. He had to wait for another opportunity in the future. That's right, Mr. Shah hadn't given up. Or it could be said that he would never give up. After all, this was the only chance Shah Liuha could find to resolve the hidden dangers in his body. Shah Liuha took a deep breath and suppressed his raging emotions. He slowly said, Mr. Ning Qin's methods are excellent. I have indeed lost. Qin Yu turned and ordered, Go and bring him back. Yun Dai respectfully nodded. She brought 2 secret disciples to carry Si Yuan over. Not too long ago, Si Yuan had woken up. As he looked at Qin Yu, his face was filled with shame and gratitude. Teacher, he only shouted out once, not knowing what else to say. Qin Yu flicked his sleeves and undid his shackles. He lightly said, If there is anything else, we can talk about it later. Behind him, Dorlice coughed lightly. A bright smile hung on her face. Then it should be my turn to go on stage. Her figure was graceful and her eyes were filled with affection. She had a bit of helplessness in her eyes as she said, I have already given you a chance, so why are you so disappointing? Others haven't even made a move yet, and you've already lost. I don't think the word play is appropriate, but my heart is in a mess right now and I really can't find the right word. Just make do and listen. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that from the very start, Dorlice had been playing with Shah Liuha. This situation was similar to how Yun Dai had slapped his face in the past. Thinking of this, everyone couldn't help but reveal a bit of sympathy. Mr. Shah seemed to be a natural enemy of beauty's. His left side had just been slapped, and now he was trying to push his right side closer. Shah Liuha's complexion sank. He coldly said, Stop talking nonsense. I am willing to bet, and I am willing to accept defeat. If you want to make a move, then hurry up. It was just a slap in the face. After living for so many years, it wasn't as if he hadn't encountered worse situations. Just you wait. In the future, I will make sure to pay you back 10 times, 100 times over. Dorlice curled her lips. Very well, if you are so anxious about something like a slap in the face, how could I possibly have the heart to disappoint you? But let me tell you ahead of time, you should be mentally prepared. Don't look at my weak appearance. The truth is that my strength isn't small. I fear this slap will hurt a bit. As she spoke, she had already walked up to him, raised her hand, and slapped him across the face. Everyone was still thinking, You are a weak woman with an ordinary aura, so what use is there in having a bit of strength? Then, they thought that Shah Liuha could be considered lucky. Even though he had been stepped on twice, he had only lost face each time. He was still alive and kicking. However, before he could finish his thought, the sound of the slap directly poured into his ears. It was not a pa, but a boom. It was as if a mountain had fallen from the sky and directly smashed into the ground, causing his eardrums to buzz. Almost everyone's jaws dropped as they stared blankly at Shah Liuha. It was like he had been hit head-on by a giant beast. First, his head tilted to the side, and then his entire body was dragged away. Those with better eyesight could clearly see that, as the slap fell, Shah Liuha's face had already deformed. Then, this deformation spread out like a wave from his head. So with a loud bang, when Shah Liuha crashed into the ground, his entire body was completely twisted. He was like a giant fried dough twist. Gulp! There was the sound of everyone gulping. At this moment, everyone who saw this felt their entire body turn numb. The thoughts that were swirling in their minds were tossed to the highest heavens. Big sister, you call this a bit of strength? You're a human-shaped Tyrannosaurus Rex. Although this slap didn't fall on their bodies, everyone felt pain for Shah Liuha. Before they thought he was lucky, but now, ha 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 ha. Blood flowed out from every orifice of Shah Liuha's head. His vision turned black and his ears rang. With great difficulty, he regained a bit of consciousness. He felt as if his entire body was about to disintegrate. Every piece of flesh and bone was groaning in pain. With just a slight movement, a wave of pain washed over him, causing him to suck in several breaths of cold air. Then he coughed and curled up into a ball, looking extremely miserable. Dorlice breathed into her palm, constantly shaking it. She said with dissatisfaction, "You don't look like a bad person, but how can your skin be so thick? It hurts." Hearing this, everyone was left speechless. Shalyoha, who had just stabilized his coughing, was so angry that he nearly fainted. Beneath his messy hair, a pair of eyes glared at her, as if he wanted to tear off several pieces of flesh. Dorlice lifted a hand and patted her chest, causing her chest to ripple. Don't look at me like that. I'm so scared, but if you want to retaliate against me, I'm afraid you won't have the chance." Shalyoha was stunned. Then he screamed out in pain. Fierce wounds appeared on his skin, and blood wildly gushed out. It was like a compression device had been installed in his body. In just a moment, he had lost most of his blood, causing his flesh and blood to turn pale. The smell of blood filled the air, leaving the entire audience deathly silent. No one thought that the true strength of this slap would only erupt at this moment. This definitely wasn't to humiliate someone, but to directly take their life. Moreover, who would have thought that such a common-looking beauty with long legs and large breasts would actually possess such terrifying strength? If a slap had such strength, who dared to underestimate it? Many of the cultivators that had fantasized about Dorlice's alluring back paled and quickly averted their eyes. Just as Shalyoha spoke, he used up all of his strength. With a loud bang, he exploded like an overinflated balloon. As flesh and blood flew out, Dorlice suddenly lifted a hand and pointed a finger. A blurry phantom suddenly appeared, struggling to escape. "Damned woman, I will remember you." With a hateful roar, the phantom shattered and was annihilated. Dorlice withdrew her hand and frowned. This person had actually escaped using a method similar to an avatar. However, if he escaped, then he would escape. After today's events, even if he didn't die, he would still be severely wounded. By the time this person recovered, she might have already returned to her main body. Chapter 808. Vast Sea City. As the southernmost point of the vast continent, this great city bordered the endless sea. Because there was a massive amount of trade between land and sea, it became a dazzling pearl on the map. It was like a giant beast lying on the ground, swallowing up massive amounts of resources every day. On this day, a strange yet ordinary team arrived outside the city. There were 2 men and 2 women. The older one seemed to be a steward, the younger one was a concubine, and the one following behind should be a maid. The reason it was strange was because most of the people that came to Vast Sea City were merchants. Not only were their teams not small, but many of them had strong physiques and powerful auras. After all, there were some precious spiritual objects and sea beasts in the sea that couldn't be placed into storage magic tools. Purchasing them depended on one's ability, but taking the treasures away was the true skill. The reason it was ordinary was because during this time there were many similar teams that had appeared in Vast Sea City. At a glance, one could tell that they weren't in this line of work. But there were very few people that dared to have ideas about these fat sheep. As they looked around, most of them had a bit of awe in their eyes. After smoothly entering the city, the 4 people, including the maid, didn't reveal the least bit of surprise towards the massive scale of Vast Sea City. They simply looked around and asked a few questions before choosing a large inn to stay in. It was just that when they checked in, there were some small twists and turns. When the group of 4 arrived, there were only 2 rooms left in the normally bustling inn. The young male host seemed a bit hesitant. The young woman with an extremely domineering figure and a charming smile smiled and said a few words in his ear. Then she turned to the dazed shopkeeper behind the counter and told him that they wanted both rooms. He was instantly envious. With such a true appearance combination, it was clear that the rooms at night wouldn't be allocated in the manner of a man and a woman. Looking at Chinyu and then at the mature and inexperienced women beside him, Both of them were incomparably beautiful. The eyes of the surrounding men turned red. Before they could wipe away their drool, another wave of guests arrived. This time it was two women. They wore opaque black veils on their heads. But just by looking at their figures, one could tell that they were absolutely beautiful women. Open a room. Sorry, there were no more. The two women were clearly a bit embarrassed. After hesitating for a moment, the shorter one said, "Shopkeeper, can you arrange something else? We sisters are very tired now. We really don't have the energy to continue running." This voice made people feel comfortable. The shopkeeper was not old, and obviously had not reached the stage where he could be as calm as a mountain. If he could help, he would definitely be happy. But no room was no room. The shopkeeper smiled bitterly, unable to help even if he wanted to. His eyes involuntarily fell on the face of the young male owner, who had yet to leave the counter. He thought to himself, why was he one step ahead of me? Although the two beauties who came later had nothing to do with him, he had to choose whether to watch a certain man hugging his left and right and enjoy the bliss of having two beauties at night, or to let two beautiful girls stay in his inn. Of course, it was the latter. Needless to say, however, it was this subconscious glance that caused the two women waiting in front of the counter to misunderstand. They glanced at the man, and after a brief pause, it was the slightly shorter woman who said, "Sir, may I ask if you can give us a room? We are willing to pay double for the room." Chin Yu was having a headache over how to sleep at night. He absent-mindedly shook his head, but then his thoughts turned and he suddenly thought of something. "I see, these two girls seem to be in a hurry. It's not good to be in a hurry." The beautiful concubine interrupted. "Didn't we agree to sleep together tonight? Also, that little girl Dai will be staying with us. If you give the room to someone else, how will Uncle Lin sleep at night?" She blinked her eyes. "Or are you interested in these two little sisters? Are you going to give them a room first and then do something else?" The complexions of the two women changed. The one who spoke took a step forward, but she was pulled back by the taller woman, who shook her head. Chin Yu knew that his plan to give the room to someone else and use this chance to escape had failed. Otherwise, who knew what that woman Dorlice would do? He bitterly smiled and quickly pulled her away. If it was just like this, then it would be fine if they never saw each other again. But Dorlice had insisted on eating some seafood. When Chin Yu and his group went out to eat, they actually ran into those two women again. The taller one was fine, but even though the shorter one had a black veil covering her face, Chin Yu could still clearly feel her sharp, knife-like eyes. Well, this meal was even more tasteless than before. Finally, Dorlice ate her fill. As she passed by the two women, she lightly tossed out a few words. "Your chest is so small, and yet you dare to be so arrogant." These words nearly ignited a war. Luckily, the taller woman desperately pulled her back. But this time, her eyes also revealed a bit of dissatisfaction. Chin Yu pulled Dorlice back to their room. Old Lin had already bid his farewells. His task was to watch over Chin Yu, so he didn't care how Chin Yu would spend the night with these two women. "What's wrong with you? Why are you always targeting others? We don't even know each other." Dorlice narrowed her eyes. "Is your heart aching?" Black lines appeared on Chin Yu's forehead. What the hell was his heart aching for? Perhaps it was because he didn't have a good complexion, but Dorlice curled her lips. "I just want to tell you that these two women are troublesome. In order to prevent you from going soft on them again, I have no choice but to offend them ahead of time." Seeing Chin Yu's unconvinced expression, Dorlice lifted a hand and pointed at herself. "Don't be in such a hurry to deny it. I am the best evidence." Chin Yu averted his eyes. It wasn't because he felt guilty, but because that crazy woman Dorlice hadn't placed her finger in the right place. Most of her finger had sunk in. It could be seen just how high and elastic it was. Yun Dai, who was standing in the back, rolled her eyes, thinking that this hateful woman was at it again. On the way here, she had been showing off her figure a lot, trying to seduce her teacher. although her teacher remained unmoved, who knew how long he would last. After all, putting aside prejudices, even though she was a woman, she couldn't help but feel her body heat up when she looked at this vixen. Yundai felt hopeless. She couldn't defeat her and her figure couldn't compare, but she wouldn't give up. Perhaps her teacher liked someone like her who was a bit too young and inexperienced. Qin Yu didn't ask Dorlice how she knew. Those two women represented trouble. He had also smelled the faint scent of blood. After leaving behind a "don't cause any more trouble," he sat in front of the round table and closed his eyes to think. This time he had brought Dorlice, Yundai, and Old Lin to Billowing Wave City. The reason was simple. What he was about to do next would surely anger the Beast Trainer Alliance if there was an accident. Digging up a grave, no one would be able to endure something like this. Thus, in order to avoid bringing trouble to Sky Declaring Pavilion, Qin Yu's proposal to change his name and participate in the competition was easily approved. Of course, the matter of forging an identity was naturally handed over to Sky Declaring Pavilion to handle. Qin Yu didn't know the specifics, but what he had in his hands was a proper background record. His name was Qin Yu, and he was a concubine descendant of a prominent family in the Western Tomb region, the Qin family. His identity was real, and he did indeed have the qualifications to participate in the competition. As for how Sky Declaring Pavilion accomplished this, he had no idea. Now, the four of them appeared in Vast Sea City. The reason was simple. The departure point designated by the Beast Trainer Alliance was here. Participants with backgrounds and influences could choose to go by themselves. As for a scattered beast trainer like Qin Yu with his current identity, he could only obediently follow the requirements of the Beast Trainer Alliance and take a ship to the designated location. Since he had changed his identity, in order to avoid unnecessary trouble, he had to put on a complete act. Doralice's eyes flashed. She turned and walked outside. "I'll give you two some time to be alone. Little Dai, don't say that Big Sister didn't give you a chance. If you can push down that fake teacher of yours during this time, then Big Sister won't come back tonight. I'll give him to you. How about it? Big Sister is generous, right?" As she spoke, she left behind the blushing Yundai. With a wave of her hand, she pushed open the door and left. Dorlice attracted many gazes as she left the inn. She wandered around the streets aimlessly, stopping from time to time to buy some small things. Just as she was standing outside the stall, looking at a mask made of seashells glued together from the sea with great interest, a middle-aged man with a face full of wrinkles appeared beside her. He smiled apologetically and said, "Madam, I guess you are accompanying a lord to attend an important event. We have some important information here that might interest you." Dorlice turned around, a look of surprise on her face. "What are you talking about?" The middle-aged man lowered his voice. "There's a lot. For instance, the examination questions of the competition, as well as the personal information of the examiner in charge of the examination, their preferences, and so on." Dorlice gasped and quickly covered her mouth. Really? The middle-aged man smiled brilliantly. "Of course it's true, but this isn't a good place to speak. Madam, if you are interested." A moment later, the two of them arrived at a courtyard hidden deep in a long alley. There were already many people waiting inside. When they saw the two of them, they all stood up. "Hey, is this the place you wanted to bring me to?" Dorlice glanced at the courtyard door that was closed and then swept her eyes over the crowd. There were men and women, as well as several children. At this time, all of them were staring at her with wide eyes. The middle-aged man leading the way didn't answer. He looked at an old man across from him. This old man's eyes were closed, and he held a black stone in his hand. Shwa, the old man opened his eyes. Within his cloudy eyes, there was a hint of joy. He slowly nodded towards the middle-aged man. He was right. The middle-aged man turned to look at Dorlice. His lips moved, and he said, "My clan member that was left outside, you have suffered all these years. But don't worry. Since we found you here, no one will be able to bully you in the future." "Dorlice, She looked at the middle-aged man and then at the people around him. They all had happy smiles on their faces. She thought that it really was the remnants of the giant spirit clan. If they knew that the one standing in front of them right now was the Western Tomb Dao monarch's most powerful subordinate god, Dorlice, just what sort of expression would they have? She tilted her head and thought for a moment. Then she stepped forwards and slowly raised her hand. A dazzling holy light erupted from her body, flooding the entire space. The smiling giant spirit clansmen that were preparing to welcome their new clansman froze. Holy light! After being hunted down by the Western Tomb divine officials for countless years, the hatred and fear of this power had already seeped into the bones of every giant spirit. This was a trap. The middle-aged man that brought Dorlice back was instantly filled with pain and remorse. He roared out loud, "Hurry and run!" Crackle! His bones and flesh exploded, and his body rapidly grew. In the blink of an eye, he reached 40 to 50 feet tall. If it weren't for the array formation covering the courtyard, he would have already been seen by the people outside. He lifted a hand and punched out. The wild strength caused the air to scream, but in the next moment he was sent flying away, facing the Western Tomb's subordinate god Dorlice. Even if it was only a projection, it wasn't something an ordinary giant spirit like him could contend with. With a loud bang, the person fell to the ground, blood flowing out of his nose and mouth. The giant spirit clansmen that hadn't retreated in time all paled. Chapter 809. The holy light was like a tide that enveloped all the members of the giant spirit realm, instantly sealing the blood fluctuations in their bodies. After chasing them for hundreds of thousands of years, the divine officials of the Western Tomb had racked their brains in hopes that they could eliminate the Dragon City Master. What Dorlice was using now was a divine technique that specifically targeted the giant spirit race. If an ordinary Western Tomb divine official were to use it, they would at most be able to suppress the giant spirit race to a certain extent. But these people had bad luck. With Dorlice's level, she was able to completely suppress them. More than a dozen men, women, old and young, all widened their eyes in horror. The heavily injured middle-aged man had already dispelled his transformation. He closed his eyes in pain. It was all his fault, but the elder had clearly verified that the blood of the same race flowed through her veins. Why did it turn out like this? The Western Tomb had always been ruthless towards the giant spirit clan. How could they possibly spare her? He even trained her to be the scavenger of West Hill. Dorlice had an indifferent expression, and her eyes were icy cold. Whether it was an old woman or a crying child, nothing could shake her heart. The reason why gods were called gods was because they were above the rules of the heavens. Wherever their eyes could see, anyone who was not as good as their eyes could see was like an ant. She lifted her hand and slowly clenched her fingers. The members of the giant spirit clan that were shrouded in holy light all revealed pained expressions. If everything went according to plan, death would soon arrive. Pah! The courtyard doors were pushed open from the outside. In the next moment, the suffocating pressure that had suffocated the giant spirit clan quickly receded like a tide. Having escaped from death, they gasped for breath and subconsciously looked at the door, at the figure who had saved them. Dorlice turned around, the indifference in her eyes and face disappearing. She covered her mouth and giggled. "Io, this young man's tailing skills are quite good. This big sister didn't even notice you at all." Chinyu frowned. He slowly said, "Give me some face and don't make things difficult for them." Dorlice blinked her eyes. "You're soft-hearted, just like that? Don't forget that time." Chinyu took a deep breath. "I said, don't make things difficult for them." Dorlice paused for a moment and then turned to leave. "All right, this big sister will certainly agree to your request. However, these people better not appear in front of me again." Then a small voice sounded out in his ear. "Chinyu, you owe me another favor. Remember this." Chinyu's expression didn't change. He swept his eyes over the panic-stricken giant spirit clan members and said in a low voice, "All of you leave immediately." With that, he turned around and left. The members of the giant spirit clan who survived were still a little dizzy. Who was the man who came later? How could he make the scavenger of the West Hill show mercy? Moreover, why did he help the giant spirit race? They couldn't find the answer, but this didn't affect the giant spirit race clansmen in the courtyard. They left in the shortest possible time. They had to inform their clansmen of what had happened today as soon as possible to prevent any more clansmen from being exposed. One in front and one behind, Qin Yu and Doralice silently walked forwards. It wasn't until they entered the inn's room that she turned around and sneered, "Why are you following me so eagerly? Are you afraid that I'll turn around and kill them again?" Qin Yu lightly said, "They have already left." Doralice walked past her and sat down. She fetched a teacup and filled it, but it was immediately snatched away by a small hand. Doralice angrily drank it all in one gulp. She slapped down the teacup. "Consider this your apology to me." Qin Yu was expressionless. He picked up another teacup and quietly sipped on it. Yun Dai walked over, holding a hot towel in her hands. "Teacher, wipe your face." Her small eyes swept over Qin Yu, and a smile appeared on her face. It seemed that this woman had suffered a setback at her teacher's hands. How satisfying! Doralice lifted a hand, and the towel fell into her hands. "Little Dai, did you see this? Is this called charm? As soon as this big sister went out for a little while, your teacher impatiently chased after me. So, to see that you are still in the mood to smile, this big sister is really worried for your brain. If possible, remember to top up your account." Yun Dai clenched her teeth, her face white with anger. Qin Yu secretly sighed. Indeed, when it came to a war of words, even 3 Yun Dais added together weren't Doralice's match. Nothing happened that night. Qin Yu sat on a chair the entire night with Yun Dai beside him. Doralice occupied the large bed. She shouted dozens of times that she was lonely and cold, that she wanted someone to warm her bed, and so on, but no one paid any attention to her. At dawn, Qin Yu got up and opened the window. He turned his head and saw Doralice sleeping on the bed without a care in the world. Her long white legs were almost completely exposed. He couldn't help but rub his temples. Luckily, the ship would arrive today. Otherwise, he guaranteed, he wouldn't stay with this woman any longer. One moment she wanted to take a bath. The next moment she wanted to pee. And the most intolerable thing was that her sleep-talking actually sounded like she was moaning. This was truly strange to the extreme. Elder Lin was already waiting in the hall. After Qin Yu's group of 3 left, they ate a bit of breakfast and then left. Coincidentally, this was the 3rd time they met the 2 women who had asked them for a room. Qin Yu could even see the shorter woman's chest heaving up and down as she gasped for breath. It was clear that yesterday's words about Doralice's small chest had an astonishing, killing power. And what was even more coincidental was that looking at the direction they left in, they should both be going to the pier. Qin Yu secretly guessed that these 2 women were likely going to board the Beast Trainer Alliance's ship. The pier was extremely lively in the morning. After mixing in with the flow of people, the 2 women soon disappeared from sight. With Elder Lin leading the way, they soon found the boarding point. There were already many people gathered here. Although they didn't speak, it was easy to tell who they were from their temperament. Doralice moved closer to Qin Yu's ear and whispered, "Hey, there are so many people here, but you don't look like a beast trainer the most." Qin Yu sneered inwardly. What nonsense was she spouting? How did he not look like one? He didn't look like one at all. Elder Lin turned around. "Mister, let's wait here. The ship will arrive soon." Qin Yu nodded. At this time he felt his back heat up, as if someone were viciously glaring at him. Qin Yu turned his head and frowned, a bit speechless. It was those 2 women again, but this time they had clearly found their companions. 3 young men surrounded them. Looking at their dignified and elegant appearances, they were like peacocks spreading their feathers. When the petite woman met Qin Yu's eyes, she didn't panic at being discovered. Instead, she fiercely glared at him and turned her head to say something. The three young men looked up one after another. Although their expressions were arrogant and their eyes were filled with disdain, Qin Yu believed that he wasn't mistaken. Their eyes were filled with jealousy. That's right. Compared to Dorlice, although those two women were beautiful, the disparity in their figures was obvious. Hee, Qin Yu, do you think you have a lot of face by bringing me with you? How about it? Do you want to touch me? Let big sister tell you. I've already tried it, and it feels quite good. Qin Yu's face stiffened. Dorlice moved even closer. Big sister is being serious. Look, this body isn't mine anyway. If you want it, I don't have anything to lose. Perhaps if you touch me, and I'm happy, I'll give you a little something to eat. Let's talk about it. Qin Yu took a step back. He immediately decided not to say anything to her. Shameless fox spirit. Shui cursed in a low voice. Her big sister, Shui Qingqing, pulled her back. That's enough. It's not like there's any deep hatred between us. It's just a few words. Don't care about it. Big sister. Ever since she was a child, she had always wanted to be stronger than others. But things like breasts that were big or small weren't things that could be controlled by humans. Indeed, there were some methods that could make her breasts puff out. But Shui Ye disdained such unnatural things. But the more it was like this, the more she cared about her breasts. In a situation where Dorlice didn't know about this, she had ruthlessly poked at this little girl's sore spot. Of course, even if she knew, Dorlice wouldn't be lenient. She would likely use even more force. The three young elites glanced at each other and spoke words of comfort. They said that second Miss Shui was magnanimous and there was no need to lower herself to the same level as this person. They also said that they were all proper beast trainers. As long as their luck was good this time, they could find a famous teacher to be their disciple, and their future prospects would be limitless. There was no need to argue with this sort of person. As the sun rose into the sky, a thunderous roar echoed out from the depths of the sea. Then, at the end of the horizon, the thick sea fog violently tumbled and a large ship broke through the fog. The ship had arrived. All of the cultivators waiting here were startled. They all looked up. The ship was fast. As it approached, everyone could see it more clearly. Many people sucked in a breath of cold air. The ship's hull should have been jet black at first, but its surface was now covered in a large patch of dark red. The sea breeze carried with it a faint smell of blood. When combined with the dark red color, there were large patches of repair marks, as well as all sorts of giant claw marks. This caused everyone's hearts to shiver and a cold chill to rush into their heads. This ship had clearly experienced countless fierce battles in the past. As the ship drew closer, everyone on the shore could see the sailors standing on the deck. Their expressions were firm and resolute. They stood on the deck, allowing the wind and waves to blow against them. It was like their feet had taken root, not moving at all. Near the pier, the busy ships seemed to recognize the origin of this ship. They all drew back and opened up a path that led straight to the pier. At this time, countless eyes gathered on the ship. As they looked at the ship that broke through the fog, awe filled their eyes. A flag was inserted at the top of the ship, fluttering in the sea breeze, black with white lines. The lines wove together, forming a jade cup. This flag represented one of the most formidable influences in the world, the Beast Trainer Alliance. Drop the anchors! With a loud shout, for giant anchors at the bow and stern of the ship began to rumble as they pulled on the chains and smashed into the depths of the sea. 6 decks were lowered and landed on the shore. A blind, bearded man in black armor stood at the bow of the ship. He coldly swept his eyes over everyone. Use your ticket to board the ship. Anyone that tries to bluff their way through will be severely punished. Without any nonsense, they began to check in and board the ship. Qin Yu subconsciously glanced at the 2 women. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he suddenly felt that the two of them were very nervous. Someone looked up. This time it was the taller woman. When their eyes met, Qin Yu's heart stirred. She really was nervous. Qin Yu didn't know why, but his intuition told him that something interesting was about to happen. They smoothly checked in and boarded the ship. With Sky declaring Pavilion's preparations, there naturally wouldn't be any problems. Just as he stepped onto the deck, there was a sudden uproar from another deck, mixed with the panicked voices of young men. "Where's my ticket? Hurry up and look. Where did we put our tickets? Hurry up and look. Where did the three of us put our tickets?" In the chaos, Qin Yu could clearly see two women holding hands as they boarded the ship from another deck, blending into the crowd and vanishing from sight. In the end, three unlucky fellows who lost their tickets were thought to be deliberately causing trouble. They were ruthlessly beaten up by the sailors and thrown into the sea. Qin Yu was expressionless. He thought that they really were two troublemakers. Chapter 810. If it weren't for the fact that the tickets were stolen at the last minute and the cabins had already been allocated, the two sisters would have absolutely believed that these four people were sent by them. Both sides stood at the door, speechless for several seconds. Then they turned and entered the cabins. It wasn't like they had a deep grudge against each other. Since they had already boarded the Beast Trainer Alliance's ship, no one wanted to cause any more trouble. The cabin wasn't too large, and there was only a small window. It should have been damaged before, but the person who repaired it must have been terrible. They reinforced the already small window with horizontal plates and blocked out a third of the light. The light was dim, and the smell in the air wasn't too good. Although it wasn't too thick, there was a musty and sour smell that drilled into one's nostrils. Dorlise frowned, a look of disgust on her face, but she didn't say anything. Although this woman appeared unreliable, her heart was as clear as a mirror. The only comforting thing was that the cabin wasn't small. There were several separate rooms inside, more than enough for 4 people to live in. Qin Yu thought this was the best. He didn't plan on being harassed by Dorlise at night. In fact, after entering the cabin, Dorlise was unexpectedly quiet. She spent most of the day inside. Qin Yu was a bit surprised. Thinking about it, he didn't gain anything, so he suppressed his thoughts. As long as she didn't cause any trouble, he would let her be. The ship sailed through the sea. Even though the ship was thick, one could still clearly hear the roars and tumbling of the sea. This was especially true at night. After the lights were turned off and the cabin was incomparably dark, these sounds became especially clear and drilled into one's ears. However, sailing wasn't always boring and depressing. When the skies were clear and the seas were calm, Qin Yu would leave the cabin and take a stroll. He wasn't the only one who chose to do this. Several days later, a trade fair was formed on the top deck. Whenever the weather was good, many people would gather here to trade goods. Qin Yu didn't buy anything. What he did the most was stand on the high fence around the ship and look out at the endless sea. There was also a sea here, and it was far larger than the world he was in. This caused Qin Yu's thoughts to inevitably fly far away. He thought about those people who were far away and didn't know what their current situation was. A sense of urgency rose in his heart. He didn't have much time to waste. On the 5th day of sailing, when Qin Yu turned to leave the deck, he ran into the hurried Shui. Their eyes met for a moment before looking away, as if they were strangers that didn't know each other. Of course, besides a few quarrels, the two were strangers to begin with. On the 8th day, Qin Yu saw Shuya once more. She was at the trade fair on the deck, constantly talking with people as if she were looking for something. If that was the case, he certainly wouldn't be so bored as to pay attention to her. If that was the case, Qin wouldn't be so bored as to care about what she was doing. The black-robed man at the corner, as well as the man and woman at the 3rd stall on the left. Even though the 3 of them acted normally, their constant glances made it clear that their target was this woman. Thinking about it, if it weren't for the fact that they were on the Beast Trainer Alliance's ship and didn't dare to act recklessly, they would have already attacked. On the 11th day, Qin Yu saw Shueya once more. Although she wore a black veil over her face, he could still feel her anxiety. As he thought about how the other woman by her side hadn't come out at all during this time, as well as the smell of blood he smelled when they first met, Qin Yu fell into deep thought. Of course, he was only a bystander. As long as he wasn't implicated, he wouldn't do anything. On the 14th day of sailing, night, after the lights were extinguished, the cabin fell into darkness. Qin Yu leaned against the headboard, quietly thinking about some matters. Ever since he came to this world, he had been constantly on the move and busy. These 10 or so days of idleness allowed him to sort out his gains during this period of time and make some basic plans for the future. Suddenly, Qin Yu frowned. His consciousness left his thoughts, and he sat up, a dignified expression on his face. Pushing open the door, Zhang Xian activated the illumination formation and saw Elder Lin walking out of the cubicle opposite him with a grim look on his face. As their gazes met, they both realized something was wrong. Today, the sea seemed a bit too quiet. The illumination formation was reactivated, causing Yundai to wake up from her cultivation. She had a puzzled look on her face. "Teacher, what is it?" Before Qin Yu could answer, Dorelis's lazy voice sounded out from behind him. "The sea is too quiet tonight. This isn't a good omen." As she spoke, she yawned. She lifted her arms and stretched her waist. Her dress immediately stuck to her body, drawing out curves that made one's mouth go dry. Elder Lin's pupils shrank. His eyes fell on Dorlise, revealing a bit of seriousness. This mysterious woman was likely an unstable factor. Even with his cultivation and eyesight, he still couldn't see through her depths. As if sensing something, Dorlise looked up. Their eyes met, and after a brief pause, they both looked away. Qin Yu took in all of this, but he had no intention of interfering, whether it was Dorlise or Elder Lin. Although these two people were kind to him, they both had their own unspeakable reasons for doing so. They feared and restrained each other. To Qin Yu, this was actually more advantageous. Perhaps to confirm Dorelis's words, the peacefully moving ship suddenly shook. This sort of situation was common at sea. It could be caused by a slightly larger wave. But compared to the previous quietness, the shaking was particularly obvious. In addition to Dorelis's words, Yundai's complexion changed. Before she could say anything, another shaking occurred. This time, it was much stronger than before. One could clearly see that the entire ship was moving up and down. It was as if a bugle horn had been blown, and the roar of the sea suddenly became violent. The loud rumbling sound penetrated the hull of the ship and drilled into everyone's ears. Elder Lin said in a low voice, "Something has happened." He frowned, a heavy look in his eyes. The Beast Trainer Alliance's headquarters was located at Starfall Archipelago. They had already signed a non-aggression pact with the various sea races. But tonight's great waves were clearly being pushed by some existence in the dark. Elder Lin could smell a faint monster energy in the air. The alarm sounded. Dense and steady footsteps sounded out from all directions. The sailors had faint expressions as they rushed to their respective positions. Although the sea routes had been much calmer these past years, the battles with the sea creatures had never stopped. They were all experienced elites. In the face of this sudden situation, they didn't panic at all. "Everyone stay in your cabins. You are not allowed to leave without permission." A loud shout spread through the entire ship. Qin Yu recognized this voice. It was the blind, bearded man who had appeared once during the ticket inspection. Hum! Hum! The ship began to shake, and one formation after another was activated. Thick spikes protruded from the hull, and huge horns protruded from the bow and stern of the ship. Rocking in the huge waves, the ship was like an awakened beast baring its sharp and ferocious claws and teeth. Suddenly, the tumbling sea water shattered and a massive shadow flew out, brazenly slamming into the ship. Bang! With a loud explosion, the ship's course suddenly changed by several degrees. Large sections of the hull broke apart and black ironwood fragments that were dozens of times harder than stone shot out in all directions, riddling the bodies of over a dozen sailors. Puff, puff! Blood wildly sprayed out, and their bodies slumped to the deck. The smell of blood in the air thickened. King Level C Beast! Hurry! Activate the defense plan. Everyone on deck, retreat to cover! Screams rose up. The calm and steady sailors couldn't hide the panic in their voices. Those hiding in the cabins couldn't see what was happening outside, but they could hear the sounds coming from the deck, and they could guess that the situation wasn't good. All of them tensed up. Without giving the sailors time to retreat, two more massive shadows tore through the sea water. Bang! The entire ship was struck sideways and collided with several large waves. This time, the cabins closest to the deck were unlucky, and they were directly torn apart. Everyone could clearly hear the pitiful and desperate screams of men and women as they died. But the ones who suffered the greatest casualties were the sailors who weren't covered. They were the most elite maritime warriors. But what they faced now was a formidable existence that they couldn't contend with. The bearded man roared and stomped heavily on the deck. Bang! A big hole appeared on the deck, and a powerful force pushed him up into the sky. He held the black giant axe in his hand and fiercely chopped towards a black shadow that was whipping towards him. With a loud bang, Big Beard was sent flying back. Along with him fell a huge tentacle that was so thick that it would take 10 people to wrap their arms around it. It fell on the deck, but did not lose its vitality. Like a giant snake with its head cut off, it rolled around crazily, smashing the reinforced wooden stakes and crushing a few sailors into minced meat. Death and blood stimulated the sailors' ruthlessness. They didn't run away. Instead, they surged forwards, soon submerging the severed tentacle. From the massive hole in the deck, the bearded man rushed out. He was already wounded, and his body was covered with black ironwood spikes. He looked like a giant porcupine, but his taut flesh made it so that the wooden spikes couldn't penetrate even an inch further. On the surface of his wounds, only a tiny amount of blood flowed out. With a loud roar, the bearded man leapt up and plunged into the sea with his great axe in hand. In the next moment, the entire sea region was set off in raging waves. Violent roars filled with pain rang out like thunderclaps exploding at the bottom of the sea. It was clear that both sides were engaged in a life or death battle deep in the sea. As the ship sailed through the sea, it was lifted up by the giant waves and then crashed back down. Seawater wildly poured in from the damaged parts of the hull. Qin Yu glanced at the icy cold seawater pouring into the cabins. He frowned and said, "We have to leave." Since the seawater had entered here, there must have been some damage to the hull of the ship. As for the bearded man's previous warning, it didn't apply now. Qin Yu's group of 4 pushed open the door. Just as they took several steps, there was the sound of another door opening behind them. 2 women covered in black veils walked out, supporting each other. Their eyes met. Qin Yu turned and continued forward. The 2 women hesitated for a moment and then left in the opposite direction. And at this time, the cultivators in the nearby cabins also ran out as the seawater poured in. There was a chaotic clamor in their ears. Everyone's faces were filled with panic and fear. Soon, Qin Yu saw the source of the seawater pouring in. It was a massive crack. The surface was smooth and clean, as if it had been directly cut open by a giant saber. Qin Yu's heart chilled. He turned to look at old Lin and saw that his complexion had become incomparably ugly. Although he hadn't seen the bearded man fight with the giant sea beast just now, he could judge from the movements that the giant beast's attack methods were completely different from what he saw. Then, where did this horizontal crack in the hull come from? There was more than one giant beast. Just as the 2 of them were thinking this, the seawater suddenly broke apart. The bearded man who had rushed into the sea with his great axe fell onto the deck. There was a massive wound on his chest, one that couldn't be seen how deep it was. Blood wildly gushed out, unable to stop. "Prepare to abandon ship." With a loud roar, blood gushed out from his nose and mouth. His body swayed, and he fell to his knees on the deck. Chapter 8:11. The cultivators that ran onto the deck were stunned for a moment before they paled. Bang! A giant shadow smashed into the deck. Even though there was an array formation blocking it, several unlucky fellows were instantly crushed into meat patties. Run! With screams, people rushed out from the cabins and wildly ran in all directions. But soon they fell into despair. This was because the cultivators that ran at the front of the ship didn't even disappear from sight before they fell into the sea with miserable cries. These people's chests were pierced through by thick spikes today. There were 3 giant beasts that attacked the Beast Trainer Alliance's ship. The situation had completely spiraled out of control. The giant beasts hiding in the sea had used a scheme to eliminate the only threat on the ship. Then they no longer continued to hide themselves. 3 giant shadows emerged from the sea. 6 icy cold eyes locked onto the ship and all the cultivators on board. But what happened next was unexpected. The giant beasts didn't launch another slaughter. Several thick and powerful tentacles reached out, pulling the battered ship into the darkness and into the unknown. It wasn't that no one tried to escape, but that anyone that dared to leave the ship would be exterminated by an invisible force. After several waves of cultivators were eliminated, no one continued to show themselves. Everyone drilled into the cabins, hiding under the flashing array formations. Their faces were pale as they waited for their fate to be judged. Qin Yu's complexion was ugly. He thought that because things had been going too smoothly before, his luck had been emptied out. With Senior Lin, Doralice, and himself, even if the 3 deep-sea giant beasts outside were strong, it wouldn't be difficult to escape. But once he did so, his identity would inevitably be exposed. If he wanted to participate in the competition as scheduled, he feared it would be impossible. As Qin Yu's thoughts raced, his heart fiercely shrank. He reached out a hand and pushed Yundai away. In the next moment, the cabin shattered. Qin Yu drew back to avoid being sucked in. Walala! Black seawater appeared in front of him. Strong winds brought with them the pained and angry roars of the great beasts. Qin Yu grabbed onto a wooden stake to stabilize himself. He narrowed his eyes and looked up. Because the great beast that was dragging the ship was too close, it was injured by the explosive strength within the ship. As it tumbled about, large swathes of seawater were soon dyed red. Qin Yu swept his eyes around and thought that this was ruthless enough. There was clearly some sort of self-destructive device hidden within the ship. In that instant of eruption, the ship had already disintegrated into several pieces. From the looks of it, it should have been activated by the sailors who had escaped before. Could it be that they knew the purpose of these giant beasts dragging the ship away? Without much time to think, seawater wildly surged towards him. Qin Yu shouted out that he would meet them at Starfall Archipelago and then wildly ran into the cabin. He had already made his preparations. Once the rotten ship sank to the bottom of the sea, he would quietly escape and think of a way to rush to Starfall Archipelago. Behind him, the furious roars of the giant beasts and the despairing screams of a large number of cultivators could be heard. It was clear that the self-destruction of the ship had thoroughly enraged the giant beasts. After discovering that they couldn't bring the cultivators on board with them, they had finally begun a large-scale slaughter. Qin Yu shook his head inwardly. Looking at the current situation, he should be thanking the heavens and earth if even 30% of the cultivators on the ship could survive. Qin Yu suddenly heard a slight movement in his ears. He didn't care too much about it. After all, even if the ship was broken into several pieces, it was still a large piece with the volume of the ship. It was normal for there to be people hiding inside. But when he smashed open a door and saw the people inside, he couldn't help but pause. "Brother-in-law, you're finally here. Hurry up and kill them." Hearing these words, Qin Yu's lips twitched. He thought that this little girl was too wicked. She had set up a trap in the blink of an eye. "You want me to be cannon fodder and give you a chance to escape? Keep dreaming. You 3, You've been on the ship for a long time, so you should be well aware that I don't know them. Do what you need to do. I won't disturb you any further." As he spoke, he turned and left. After a moment of hesitation, the woman of the three attacked. She lifted her hand, and a long black whip shot out like a shadow. Although Qin Yu wasn't wrong. Since this matter had been seen today, there was a chance that it would be leaked. They couldn't take this risk. Qin Yu fiercely dodged to the side, avoiding the whip behind him. He feared that he would be tricked by this little girl this time. As he thought, as the three people saw Qin Yu's movements, their eyes widened and they attacked at the same time. Bang! There was a dull explosion, carrying with it an incomparably powerful aura. It directly broke into everyone's ears, shaking their eardrums and causing their hearts to skip a beat. The pupils of the black-robed man in front violently shrank. As he looked at the rapidly approaching figure, fear appeared in his eyes. Then he was sent flying backwards, smashing through the cabin and vanishing from sight. The man and woman behind him paused, but since they had already attacked, it was impossible for them to stop midway. Qin Yu's speed increased. Sensing the cold killing intent pressing down on him, the man roared out loud. He lifted his saber with both hands and ruthlessly chopped down. He could guarantee that this saber strike was an unprecedented peak. But it didn't have any effect at all. The dazzling saber light shattered into pieces. The web between the man's thumb and index finger split open, and he could feel a sharp pain in his chest. As his consciousness fell into darkness, he suddenly thought that if he hadn't stopped this person from leaving just now, then there were no ifs. "Gotcha!" Qin Yu let go, allowing the woman's body to softly fall to the ground. From start to finish, in less than a breath of time, all three cultivators had died. The two sisters that hadn't had time to escape were left stunned in place. They looked at Qin Yu and then at the corpses on the ground, their complexions pale. All of a sudden, there was a loud bang. The ship fragment, which was originally quite stable, seemed to have been ruthlessly whipped. It shattered and flew out, spinning and disintegrating. Qin Yu's feet sank, his body sticking to the ground. But the two women in front of him clearly didn't have this ability. With a shriek, one of them panicked and hugged the table beside him tightly, while the other was sent flying by the impact. "Big sister!" Shui Ye screamed. Walala! The solid hull of the ship was torn apart, revealing black seawater. It was like a gaping maw, waiting for delicious prey to fall into it. "Am I going to die?" Shui Qingqing paled. Fear inevitably gushed out from the depths of her heart, but soon her eyes widened. "No." Shui Ye released her hand. She pushed off the ground and flew over. She grabbed onto her sister's arm and grabbed onto the broken hull with her other hand. Her palm was cut by sharp wooden spikes, but Shui didn't seem to feel anything. She smiled and said, "I've caught you." Just as she was about to pull her up, there was a loud explosion. The two sisters' faces instantly lost all color. A giant tentacle tore through the seawater, ruthlessly lashing towards the two of them. As long as they met, they would be crushed to pieces. "Hurry and let go." Shui revealed a distressed expression. But it was already too late. A shadow flashed in front of them. The two sisters felt as if their eyes were playing tricks on them. In the next moment, a massive collision erupted and the shock waves blew them into the cabin. The huge tentacles slammed into the seawater with a low and miserable cry. The black shadow retreated quickly, and its legs sank deep into the hull of the ship with a paw sound. Qin Yu's face paled. He forcefully jumped out, grabbed one person in each hand, and wildly ran forwards. He couldn't help but praise the Beast Trainer Alliance's ability to build ships. Even if the ship was broken into countless pieces, as long as there was an intact place and the cabin door was tightly shut, it could temporarily stop the seawater from pouring in. Moreover, this ship was extremely sturdy. For example, the fragment that Qin Yu was on had been struck once, and yet it hadn't completely disintegrated. He rushed into a relatively intact cabin and closed all the doors and windows. Then he extinguished the lights and pulled the two women to quiet down. The ship fragments sank into the seawater, constantly tumbling about in the waves. If it weren't for Qin Yu holding on to them, the two women would have never been able to stabilize themselves. They looked up and could faintly see Qin Yu's solid back in the darkness, although they knew that nothing good would come of falling into his hands. As they listened to Qin Yu's slow and steady breathing in the darkness, they couldn't help but feel a sense of peace in their hearts. It was like, by standing behind him, they wouldn't have to fear the wind and rain in front of them. Perhaps it was because Qin Yu's punch had hurt the great beast, or perhaps it was because the waves had washed them far away to a safe zone, but the follow-up pursuit didn't arrive. The rumbling sounds of the seawater gradually quieted down. Qin Yu's tense body relaxed a little. After waiting for a moment, he let go and stood up, activating the illumination array formation. The sudden light caused the two women to feel uncomfortable. They subconsciously raised their hands to block it. Then, Qin Yu's faint voice echoed in their ears. "Don't think that just because I saved you that this matter is over." The Shui sisters' hearts sank. Looking at his expressionless face, they panicked. I was the one who framed you. If you want to do anything, then come at me. Don't touch my big sister." Shuya clenched her teeth. Shui Qingqing's heart tightened. Her chest heated up and she spat out a mouthful of blood. Her body slumped to the ground. As her consciousness fell into darkness, she heard her little sister's screams in her ears. Looking at Shuya holding on to her big sister and crying in front of him, Qin Yu revealed an embarrassed expression, but he quickly covered it up. Thinking for a moment, he squatted down and said, "If you don't want her to die, then don't cry. Give her to me." When Shui Qingqing woke up, it was already 3 days later. She slowly regained her composure and looked at her surroundings. It was only then that she determined that she was still alive. "Big sister, you're awake." Shuya, who had been standing guard at the side, was pleasantly surprised. Shui Qingqing helped her up and fed her a few mouthfuls of warm water. Then her expression tightened. "Where is he?" Shui Qingqing was startled. She lifted a hand and pointed to the open cabin. Big Brother Qin went outside. Big Brother Qin? Shui Qingqing's complexion changed. She grabbed onto her little sister's hand. Did he bully you?" A single man and a single woman, above the boundless sea, and in this sort of semi-enclosed environment. Qin Yu hadn't killed them and had even saved her. Of course, this wasn't without a price. Shui's face flushed red. She waved her hands in panic. No. Big sister, what are you thinking about?" Her lips moved. In truth, Big Brother Qin is a good person. Shui Qingqing's eyes widened. "Really?" Shui nodded. Really. I'm not lying to you at all." Standing outside the door, Qin Yu waited for the voices inside to gradually calm down. Then he rubbed his nose and pushed open the door. The conversation came to an abrupt end. "Big Brother Qin, my big sister has woken up." Shuya excitedly stood up, but soon she seemed to think of something and her face flushed red. Qin Yu pretended not to see anything. He lightly said, "It's good that she's awake. If there's nothing else, then rest well. She is still very weak right now." Shui Qingqing struggled to bow. "Thank you, Big Brother Qin." Qin Yu nodded. He walked to a corner and sat down cross-legged. Then he closed his eyes and began to meditate. The two sisters clearly didn't want to disturb him. They remained quiet throughout. 2 hours later, Qin Yu opened his eyes and walked out. Now, this fragment of the ship had been pieced together by Qin Yu and assembled into an incomparably ugly floating house. It was barely usable. If Qin Yu had a choice, he would have already brought the Shui sisters and left. But as far as he could see, the sea was filled with a thick gray fog. If he probed it with his divine sense, it would soon become chaotic. After considering it again and again, Qin Yu didn't rashly enter. The fear of the unknown was one reason, and the two women in the house were also another reason. Otherwise, once Chinyu left, the two of them would likely perish. In the end, he had stirred up trouble for himself. Shaking his head, Chinyu carefully looked around. After failing to find anything, he squatted down and placed a hand into the icy, cold seawater. After several breaths of time, the calm seawater suddenly exploded. A fierce mouth, filled with fangs, stretched out and ruthlessly bit down. Pa! Pa! This was the sound of teeth breaking. Chinyu slowly stood up and pulled his hand out of the seawater. There was a half-meter-long strange fish that was covered in black, rock-like scales. Most of its teeth had been broken. The strange fish struggled in pain, wanting to escape. But its tongue was caught by Chinyu, and it could only painfully sway back and forth. Chinyu spat out his strength, and the strange fish instantly quieted down. Then he used his hand as a knife to quickly cut open its belly. Using the seawater to clean himself up, he turned and pushed open the door. Chapter 8:12. After eating another delicious meal of fish rice, Chinyu patted his belly, feeling that he hadn't lost out too much. At least these two women were finally of some use. Thinking about having a good cook on the vast sea, it was a very enjoyable thing. After cleaning and arranging the dishes, Shuaiya hesitated for a moment. She walked over to Chinyu's side and looked at her sleeping big sister. She whispered, "Big brother Chin, my big sister just woke up and she's still a bit unconscious. If there's anything wrong with her, please don't take offense." Chinyu shook his head. No. He glanced at Shuaiya and then walked to a corner. He closed his eyes and began to meditate. The great fog locks the vast sea in this place. Chinyu had to ensure that he was in his peak condition at all times. He couldn't be the least bit negligent. Looking at Chinyu, Shuaiya relaxed a little. But she couldn't help but feel a bit disappointed. She bit her lip, turned around, and returned to her sister's side. She raised her hand to cover the quilt for her sister, and then leaned against the wall to sleep. After Shuaiya's breathing stabilized and she fell asleep, Chinyu slowly opened his eyes. As he looked at her slightly curled-up body, the lines on his face softened. He had been taking care of her for the past few days, and she was really exhausted. It was not easy to meet such a pair of sisters who had deep feelings for each other in the cold and indifferent world of cultivators. It was precisely because of this that he had saved the Shui sisters that day. Of course, one of the reasons was that the Shui sisters were extremely beautiful. When a male faced a female that could attract him, he would always become impulsive, and it was very easy for him to cross the line of reason. Chinyu didn't deny this, but that was all. He had no other thoughts towards the Shui sisters. After eating fish meat for 7 consecutive days, Clearwood Chingching's condition finally stabilized. Her severe injuries began to recover. Chinyu glanced at the bowl in front of him. After thinking for a moment, he quickly wiped the bowl clean and swallowed it. It was not that he was picky, but after eating the same thing for 7 consecutive days, no matter how delicious it was, he had lost his appetite. "I'll go out and take a look." After saying this, he got up and left. He closed the door and narrowed his eyes as he looked around. A helpless look crossed his face. He still hadn't found anything. Were they going to be trapped here forever? If things continued like this, there was no way he could make it to the Beast Trainer Alliance Grand Competition. Thinking of this, Chinyu subconsciously frowned, a thoughtful look in his eyes. After a long time, he let out a long breath and made a decision in his heart. 3 days. He would have to wait for another 3 days at most. If he still couldn't find a way to leave the fog, he would have to take the risk. But things always changed more suddenly than planned. On the second day after Chinyu made his decision, as he was resting in a corner, a throbbing feeling suddenly drilled out from the depths of his heart. His eyes shot open, and without hesitation he leapt out. The Shui sisters were panic-stricken. As they looked at Chinyu, who had grabbed them, a thought popped up in their minds. After enduring for so long, he finally couldn't hold back any longer? But this thought only lasted for a very short time. With a roar, the drifting house that was pieced together was thrown high and then disintegrated in midair. Walala! Fragments continued to fall into the sea. Qin Yu stomped down, and a thick wooden beam howled out, smashing into a shadow that had leapt out from the sea. Amidst the pained howls, the black figure fell into the sea at an even faster speed, along with a large number of broken scales. In the next moment, the sea that it fell into began to violently tumble about like boiling water. Massive amounts of blood gushed out, dyeing the seawater red. Ah! The Shui sisters cried out in alarm. They covered their mouths, panic on their faces. They had already clearly seen that the black shadow that attacked them just now was the strange fish they had been eating these past days. However, that strange fish was 7 or 8 meters long. And what left them even more horrified was that there were many more similar fish in the sea. After the strange fish that Qin Yu had struck into the sea was injured, it had been divided up and eaten by its companions. Although there was seawater separating them, the Shui sisters could still clearly feel the icy cold eyes of the sea locking onto them, as if they were delicious food. This sort of gaze made them feel as if they had fallen into an icy lake. They subconsciously drew closer to Qin Yu, their two soft bodies nearly touching him, feeling the faint contact and friction on his back. Qin Yu found it hard to form any sort of romantic feeling in his heart. As he looked at the rapidly passing black shadow beneath the tumbling seawater, his lips curved up in a bitter smile, as he thought, sooner or later he would have to pay the price. After eating fish meat for almost 10 days, his retribution was about to arrive. If he were alone, then even if there were many strange fish, it wouldn't be difficult for him to escape. But if he brought the Shui sisters with him, during the brief confrontation between Qin Yu and the strange fish, the Shui sisters seemed to realize something. Their bodies stiffened, and a complex look of fear appeared in their eyes. In all fairness, Qin Yu wasn't related to them at all. When he saved them, they already owed him a massive favor. They had no reason or qualifications to ask him to continue helping them. In other words, even if Qin Yu let go now and left, he wouldn't need to be criticized by anyone. Be that as it may, even ants would try to live, let alone humans. Shui suddenly leaned over to Qin Yu's ear, her face flushing red. Big brother Qin, if we sisters can survive this time, I am willing to serve you for the rest of my life. Shui Qingqing was stunned. She looked at her arrogant little sister. Her lips moved, but she couldn't say a single word. In this current situation, besides this point, they had no other bargaining chip they could use to move Qin Yu. In the face of death, everything else had to fall back. Shui Qingqing clenched her teeth. Big brother Qin, I am also willing to offer myself to you, but please don't touch my little sister. Qin Yu. He was so angry that even the roots of his teeth hurt. At this time, he really wanted to ask, just who gave you the confidence to think that in this situation, you would still think that I would let my sperm get to my head? And most importantly, which part of him, Qin, looked like a perverted demon who took advantage of others? Too far. At this time, Shui Qingqing reached out a hand and pulled back the black veil covering her face. As Qin Yu saw her, he was momentarily distracted. That's right, in this grim situation, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that he was hanging on the line between life and death. Yet his mind had wandered for a moment. It was hard to describe Shui Qingqing's beauty. If one looked at her facial features alone, they could only be considered ordinary. But when combined together, there was an inconceivable change. In Qin Yu's life, he had seen many beautiful women. For instance, Yun Dai, who was standing beside him, as well as the flirtatious and charming Dorlice. But none of them could compare with Shui Qingqing's beauty. She was like a hazy moon hidden behind the clouds, leaving one's imagination running wild. With just a single glance, he could see all the beauty in her. Moreover, Qin Yu could faintly feel a trace of familiarity. Ah, she looked so similar to big sister Purple Moon. Within his soul space, Mei's voice echoed out. Qin Yu regained his composure. No wonder he felt a sense of familiarity. When he first saw Xue Qingqing, he hadn't been able to respond. Now that he looked at her again, there were indeed many familiar places on her face. If it weren't for Mei's reminder, then even if Xue Qingqing and Purple Moon stood together, Qin Yu wouldn't have thought that they looked alike. But once this was pointed out, he would feel that they looked alike in every way. If he looked at them for a while longer, he would feel that they were carved from the same mold. This feeling was extremely strange. The strange fish in the sea didn't give Qin Yu any more time to feel strange. In the moment that Qin Yu was distracted, they had already seized the opportunity. Then, without hesitation, the strange fish attacked. Bang! As far as the eye could see, all of the seawater exploded. At least several hundred giant strange fish leapt out from the surface. They didn't rush forwards to engage in melee combat. Instead, they opened their mouths and spat out black energy. All of the black energy gathered together. Then endless seawater rose up and was sucked into the black energy. Soon, a pitch-black super strange fish made of seawater appeared in front of him. Its body surpassed 1,000 meters. Its scales covered its surface, and a horn jutted out from its head, making it look even more fierce and ferocious. Roar! The strange fish reared back its head and roared. Qin Yu stuffily coughed, his complexion paling. The sharp syllables were like sharp needles that penetrated every pore. They pierced through his eardrums and drilled into his brain, constantly stirring. Behind him, the Xue family sisters fainted in less than a second, their bodies twitching. Qin Yu frowned. To him, a sound wave attack couldn't cause too much damage, but to the Xue family sisters, it was difficult to withstand. If this continued, the two of them would soon become two cold corpses. Qin Yu took a deep breath. The two hearts in his chest began to vigorously beat. He opened his mouth and roared. Roar! It was like the heavens were falling and the earth was sinking in. Endless ancient and wild energy surged out, instantly suppressing even the tumbling sea. Across from him, the giant fish formed from seawater froze. A trace of astonishment and fear flashed in its giant eyes. But soon, the fear vanished, replaced by a burning heat. It stubbornly stared at Qin Yu, as if it had seen an unprecedented delicacy. Hidden in the sea, the school of fish that controlled the giant fish began to roar anxiously. All of their eyes locked onto Qin Yu. Rumble, rumble. Above the boundless sea, massive black clouds suddenly gathered. With a roar, thunder fell down. But the target of this thunder wasn't Qin Yu's group of three, but the giant fish formed from seawater. Beneath the cover of thunder, the giant fish shrank a little, but it gave off an even more realistic feeling. That's right, it seemed as if it had truly come to life. Its giant eyes no longer contained simple fluctuations of emotion, but had become intelligent and spirited. The giant fish swept its tail and soared into the skies, drilling into the thunderclouds above. It opened its mouth and swallowed it whole. Crackle, crackle. Lightning erupted on the surface of its body. In the next moment, it vanished from sight. Qin Yu's complexion changed. He didn't believe that the giant fish had swallowed too much thunder and killed itself. With a thought, the purple-back, blue-wing ants howled out. Qin Yu let go and had them bring the Xue family sisters away. He expected that there would be an arduous battle following this, so he couldn't care about anything else. Chapter 813. Bang! With a loud explosion, the seawater beneath him caved in, forming the shape of a giant bull. Qin Yu stormed backwards. Lightning spread out from his arms, wreaking havoc over his body. Across from him, the super strange fish appeared. But it was only a blurry outline like a faint shadow. Its mouth twisted and deformed after being punched. But what left Qin Yu's heart sinking was that it instantly returned to normal, as if it hadn't been severely wounded at all. With a loud roar, the super strange fish vanished once more. Qin Yu took a deep breath. his expression becoming increasingly dignified. But this time, the super strange fish didn't immediately attack. It seemed to be looking for a flaw in Qin Yu's body. The air nearly froze over. A powerful aura erupted from Qin Yu's body, like an invisible giant beast that could erupt with its full strength at any moment. Bang! The seawater suddenly exploded. Qin Yu punched out his fist, and the giant waves that soared into the skies were directly smashed apart. "This is bad." Qin Yu was startled, but he didn't have time to respond. With a loud roar, the ancient's heart erupted and a potent blood vitality instantly spread across his back. In the next moment, a heavy bombardment arrived. Qin Yu was like a stone that was ruthlessly smashed into the sea. Even with the power of blood vitality blocking him, he still felt as if his entire body would be torn apart. Half of his body was numb, and his internal organs had already suffered severe injuries. As his body rapidly sank into the sea, he held his breath. It was only then that he felt a burning pain in his right shoulder. If he wasn't wrong, then there was a terrifying wound there. Luckily, as Qin Yu was severely wounded, the strength of the ancient's heart completely erupted. The numbness in his body rapidly faded away, and he could even feel his organs recovering. If someone could see the wound on Qin Yu's back, they would discover that faint traces of black energy were constantly being expelled. The flesh grew rapidly, and the granulation quickly joined together like a powerful needle and thread, allowing the wound to heal quickly. As his body rapidly recovered, Qin Yu let out a sigh of relief. He swept his eyes around the pitch-black seawater and suddenly found the key to breaking out of this situation. After the super strange fish swallowed the thundercloud, it had turned invisible. Its strength was tyrannical, but the key point wasn't its body from the very start. As long as he could eliminate the school of strange fish hidden in the seawater, the super strange fish would collapse and dissipate. Yes, that was it. Qin Yu stepped forwards. The seawater withstood the force and exploded, propelling him forwards like a cannonball. He pierced through the seawater, forming a straight channel. Although his divine sense couldn't travel too far away from his body, it was enough to lock onto his life aura at close range. Moreover, the excited fish weren't hiding themselves at all. To Qin Yu, they were like blazing torches in the darkness. "Found you!" Qin Yu lifted a hand and thrust it forwards. A wild strength erupted and the seawater began to boil, covering a large number of strange fish. Qin Yu didn't hold anything back in this fist. He had already activated the strength of the ancient's heart. It was like a bomb had been detonated in the deep sea. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 strange fish were torn to shreds. Large chunks of flesh and blood dyed the seawater red. Qin Yu frowned. He discovered that within the blood-red seawater, there was an incomparably potent poison. After being contaminated by it, black spots began to appear all over his body. Obviously, it came from these strange fish that were killed. After increasing in size by several dozen times, they actually gained the ability to use poison. But to Qin Yu, this was useless. With a thought, all of the poison that had invaded his body was crazily drawn out and gathered into Qin Yu's left index finger. It became sparkling and translucent, as if it were carved from the finest jade. After determining that this poison wasn't able to affect him, Qin Yu sneered and punched out again. Bang! Over a dozen strange fish were directly killed. The hidden super fish had already realized Qin Yu's intentions. It emitted an angry roar, and its massive body plunged into the sea. But like this, its concealment became useless. The changes in the seawater would clearly mark its position. Qin Yu didn't directly clash with it. Instead, he relied on his formidable eruption of strength to constantly dodge and chase after the strange fish. Although these strange fish were tyrannical, facing Qin Yu, who was going all out, they could only stretch out their necks and wait for death. More and more blood flowed out. The seawater was filled with a fishy smell. Qin Yu was bathed in it, as if he had emerged from an endless pool of blood. Countless toxins crazily invaded his body. But before they could harm Chinyu, they were drawn out and swallowed up. His jade-like left index finger suddenly changed. Ever since it condensed, it had swallowed and absorbed an endless amount of poison. It was like a quantitative change had caused a qualitative change, as if it had been stimulated by the poison in the strange fish's blood. In short, it had evolved. Runes began to appear on Chinyu's fingertip. They seemed to have a mind of their own. After adapting to their new existence, they opened their mouths. Bang, bang, each of these runes was like a black hole. They released a formidable swallowing strength that targeted at poison. The situation immediately changed. It was no longer the poison in the seawater that was crazily invading Chinyu's body. Rather, it was being forcefully pulled in at a speed that was over 10 times faster than before. But soon, as a massive amount of poison rushed in, the runes on Chinyu's fingertip thoroughly awakened. An even more terrifying swallowing strength erupted. They were no longer satisfied with the poison in the seawater. Thus, the strange fish that were fleeing from Chinyu suddenly discovered to their horror that their hearts began to beat faster and faster. Their blood began to heat up as if it would boil over, and they began to lose control of themselves. The strange fish cried out in panic. They urged the superfish monster to flee. But despite its strength, it couldn't even touch the hem of Chinyu's clothes. Bang! Countless wounds suddenly burst open on the body of a fast-moving strange fish. Blood spurted out of the wounds like a fountain. It was like a prologue had been opened. Then a second, a third, a fourth, low and deep explosive sounds rose and fell in the sea. In this sea region, the school of strange fish that had no natural enemies finally met their doom. The superfish monster's angry and cruel roars became increasingly powerless. Its body constantly shrank until finally, with a roar of unwillingness, its massive body collapsed and vanished, fusing back into the sea. "Pa!" Chinyu reached out and grasped it. When he spread out his fingers, he could see that there was a pitch-black bead lying peacefully in his palm. His hand was icy cold, the chill penetrating into his soul and causing his mind to become clear. This bead was something left behind after the superfish monster collapsed. It should be related to the black gas that the strange fish had spat out. Whew! Chinyu let out a long breath, his heart relaxing. If he hadn't suddenly awakened and continued to fight with the superfish monster, he might not have been able to win so easily. He couldn't figure out what this bead was, but his intuition told him that it was something good. He turned his hand and put it away. With a thought, he could faintly sense the aura of the purple-back blue-wing ants. Chinyu stepped forwards and rapidly shot out of the water, howling far away. Not long after he left, a terrifying aura suddenly appeared. The tumbling sea suddenly quieted down. At first glance, the surface of the sea was like a black mirror without any waves at all. In the red seawater, the color of blood rapidly faded. The blood was pulled up by an invisible strength, constantly sinking into the deep sea. Finally, the blood sank into a deep trench. It was pitch black inside, with no end in sight. It was like a channel leading to hell. Roar! There was a loud roar. In an instant, the mirror-like sea surface began to shatter. Giant waves soared into the heavens. As the endless seawater roared, one could faintly see a massive shadow rising up from the seabed. Chinyu caught up to the swarm of purple-back blue-wing ants that had brought the Shui sisters away. They were being attacked by a monster beast with fleshy wings on its back that looked like a snake. Luckily, the purple-back blue-wing ants had undergone many evolutions. Although they were suppressed by the monster beast's attacks, they were still able to barely remain undefeated. Of course, this was also because they had to divert a portion of their energy to ensure that the Shui sisters weren't harmed. Otherwise, the situation would have been much better. Just as Chinyu was about to attack, the monster beasts surrounding the purple-back blue-wing ants suddenly screamed out in unison, as if they felt a great fear. They turned and fled, flapping their wings with all their might. In the blink of an eye, they vanished from sight. Chinyu's complexion changed. He flashed to the side of the ant swarm and grabbed the Shui sisters. With a flick of his sleeves, the ant swarm was put away. Qin Yu stepped forwards and shot into the skies, rapidly advancing through the endless fog. Roar! A heaven-shaking roar suddenly sounded out from behind him. Qin Yu turned to see the seawater explode and a black shadow appear. With just a glance, Qin Yu's pupils violently shrank. Fear inevitably gushed out from the depths of his heart. This black shadow was actually a monster fish. It was so large that he couldn't see it clearly. It was at least 10,000 meters long. After eating the young one, the old one came. After killing the old one, a fish ancestor came running out. Even if you have a large family, you shouldn't bully others like this. Qin Yu cursed inwardly. He didn't have any thoughts of confronting it head-on. He turned and ran away with the Shuai sisters. What nonsense! 1,000-meter-long fish formed from seawater was already difficult enough to deal with, and this 10,000-meter-long one was also alive. If he didn't run away, did he want to become a snack? Qin Yu was sure that he had no chance of winning, but soon he discovered that he had been too optimistic. Not only did he have no chance of winning, but he couldn't even run if he wanted to. With a body over 10,000 meters long, the strange fish ancestor emerged from the sea like a moving island. Its massive eyes were icy cold as they locked onto the rapidly fleeing Qin Yu. Then it opened its mouth and fiercely sucked in. In that instant, seawater flowed backwards. The rapidly moving Qin Yu sucked in a breath of cold air and subconsciously cursed out loud. Even though he tried his best, his speed became slower and slower. Then he even began to fall backwards. F***ck, it could actually do this. This was too excessive. What should he do? Once he was sucked back, the result would be ha ha ha. Qin Yu's eyes suddenly brightened. Because a massive amount of fog had been sucked away, his field of vision became much clearer. An island appeared at the end of his line of sight. Looking at the surface area, this island was extremely large. As long as they hit on it, even if this fish ancestor was 10,000 meters long, it still might not be able to do anything to them. With a loud roar, Qin Yu's two hearts began to beat with all their might, pushing his blood to circulate at an astonishing speed. Chapter 814. As the island came closer and closer, Qin Yu could even clearly see the lush ancient trees that covered its surface. A happy smile lit up his lips. But at this time, Qin Yu's heart shrank. A trace of fear erupted from the depths of his heart. Behind him, half of its body was submerged in the sea. The cold eyes of the strange fish ancestor were locked onto Qin Yu. It suddenly roared. All of the fog and seawater that it sucked into its mouth shot out at an even faster speed, instantly forming a column of impact that crashed down on Qin Yu. All of Qin Yu's muscles instantly tensed up. He roared out loud and threw the Shuai sisters far into the island. Then, all of the power of blood vitality erupted from his body. With loud crackling sounds, his body began to rapidly inflate. He couldn't avoid this strike and could only forcefully resist it. Since that was the case, Qin Yu didn't dare to hold anything back. Even though he knew that revealing his ancient body would likely bring him great trouble, he couldn't care less about it. But just as his body began to expand, an invisible strength appeared, instantly descending upon his body and interrupting his transformation. It was the ancient's consciousness. Qin Yu revealed a startled expression. He didn't know what the ancient was planning to do, but if he didn't transform into his ancient body, then he would die without a doubt. Schwa. The strength of the ancient's consciousness retreated. Even so, it was too late for him to transform again. At this critical moment, Qin Yu felt the entire space around him shake. Then an incomparably massive claw stretched out from the island and slammed down at the column of water. Bang! There was a heaven-shaking explosion. Qin Yu was sent flying backwards. His eyes widened, his face stunned. The giant claw didn't move at all. It smashed apart the column of water, and then, without stopping, it pressed down on the strange fish ancestor in the sea. The entire sea seemed to be turned upside down. Qin Yu stared helplessly on as the over 10,000-meter long strange fish was grabbed by the giant claw and pulled back to the island, vanishing from sight. Even with Qin Yu's willpower and temperament, he was shocked speechless. At this moment, even breathing became incomparably difficult. Qin Yu gulped. His feet felt numb. He looked at the island that had regained its calm, as if nothing had happened at all. Then he turned to leave. But before Qin Yu could respond, a cold voice sounded out in his ears. "Little fellow, why haven't you come in yet? Do you want this old man to personally pick you up?" Even though it was a question, it definitely didn't mean that it was a question. Qin Yu shivered. No matter how unwilling he was, he still slowly walked towards the island. Nonsense. If that claw had been used to grab him, he would have been crippled with just a little more force. As for escaping, don't joke around, really, it's not funny at all. After landing on the island, Qin Yu soon saw the unconscious Shui sisters. Their luck was quite good. They were lying in a shrubbery, and although their clothes were torn and exposed a great deal of their bodies, they weren't injured at all. Although these two delicate beauties were indeed pleasing to the eye, Qin Yu really wasn't in the mood to appreciate them right now. He glanced around and retracted his gaze. His footsteps stopped, and he was a little reluctant to continue forward. Humph! A cold snort echoed in his ears, shaking him so much that his field of vision darkened. Then an imprisoning strength arrived, wrapping around him and sending him howling towards the center of the island. Qin Yu's complexion paled, but he didn't say a single word. With the methods of the giant claw on this island, it would be easy for it to kill him. Since he was still alive, that meant that things weren't as bad as he thought. Of course, all of this was just Qin Yu's own imagination. He had no idea what the exact situation was. Its speed was astonishingly fast. With several flashes of light, before Qin Yu could clearly see anything, he had already arrived. Shwa, the imprisoning strength scattered. Qin Yu shook his dizzy head. Only then did he see that he was outside a cave. The cave entrance was large, at least 100 meters in radius. But compared to the giant claw he saw before, it was at least 3 to 5 times smaller. Was it really here? "Come in." A deep and low voice echoed out from the cave. Qin Yu clenched his teeth and stepped forwards. The cave was unexpectedly bright, and the source of this light was the great ape sitting on a boulder, coldly looking at him. That's right, its fur was emitting light. Every strand of fur was like a firefly, but it was much brighter. The great ape sitting there was like a small sun, causing the temperature within the cave to be much higher than outside. Perhaps in order to increase the humidity in the air, there was a roughly cut pool next to the boulder that the great ape was sitting on. This pool was filled with seawater. At this time, in this pool, a small fish the size of a palm was swimming around. From time to time, it would look up at the great ape, its eyes filled with fear. He didn't know if he was seeing things, but no matter how Qin Yu looked at it, he felt that this small fish was very familiar, so he respectfully bowed. Junior Qin Yu greets Senior, White Ape. When White Ape didn't have any expression on his face, he seemed extremely callous. He looked at Qin Yu and said, "I can smell the blood of my own kind from your body. You should have killed apes of my lineage before. Based on this alone, I should kill you." Qin Yu stiffened and his heart raced. He didn't think that White Ape was just talking nonsense. To an existence like him, killing him wouldn't be any more difficult than crushing an ant. But what White Ape said was true. Qin Yu's mouth tasted bitter and his throat was dry, but he couldn't say a single word. Cold sweat covered his forehead. "Humph, brat, since you are well aware that I have a motive to kill you, and that it is only a matter of moving my claws, then you had best honestly answer what I ask next." As White Ape spoke to hear, he casually flicked his front claws. 2 sharp claws collided, and sparks flew in all directions, emitting the sound of metal striking metal. Qin Yu felt his entire body turn to wood. There was no need to speak any nonsense. He just needed to hurry up and nod. White Ape sniffed and lightly said, I can feel a familiar aura on your body. Let me remind you, that is an extreme power of fire. Hand it over." Qin Yu's thoughts raced. He guessed that what White Ape was speaking of was the chicken overlord that was still in a deep slumber. This fellow was truly a natural-born troublemaker at the perfection level. After hesitating for a third of a second, Qin Yu obediently handed over the chicken overlord. As for resisting, it was the same as before. "Don't joke around." White Ape's eyes focused on the chicken overlord. There was nervousness, relief, and concern in his eyes. Qin Yu immediately felt relieved. It seemed that White Ape wasn't interested in things like roast chicken for the time being. White Ape frowned. As he discovered the chicken overlord's current state, his eyes turned icy cold as he looked at Qin Yu. This feeling was like going from the warmth of spring to the bitter cold of winter. "Qin, you didn't feel good at all. Speak. What did you do? How did it fall into its heart demons?" Hearing this, Qin Yu nearly choked to death. "If you ask me about this, just who am I supposed to ask?" Of course, he could only mutter these words in his heart. If he really said them out loud, Qin Yu still hadn't lived long enough. Reporting to Senior White Ape, the situation is like this. There was no need to worry about whether or not it was shameful. At this time, he had to say what he wanted to say. Thus, White Ape's complexion soon changed. He paled as he looked at the chicken overlord that was snoring away on the ground, as well as its hard lower body. Qin, you could clearly see in its eyes that it hated iron for not becoming steel, as well as the complex emotions of wanting to strangle it to death. Qin Yu felt shameful, but White Ape felt even more shameful. Although they were of different races, in a way, after the chicken overlord obtained its inheritance, it could also be considered its junior. The awe-inspiring prestige of its seniors, the pride of their lives, had been completely ruined by this little bastard. There was an awkward silence. White Ape took a deep breath. When he looked at the chicken overlord once more, he didn't have the previous warmth and joy. Instead, his eyes were filled with the callousness of a blizzard. "If it's in such a state, why did you bring it here?" Qin Yu respectfully said, "This junior heard that in the Beast Trainer Alliance there is a treasure called the Ice Soul Jade Bed. It has a miraculous effect in treating heart demons." Then he spoke of how he had joined the Beast Trainer Alliance grand competition. White Ape's expression relaxed a little. As he looked at Qin Yu, there was a bit more warmth in his eyes. Thinking for a moment, he asked, "Are you a beast trainer?" Qin Yu nodded. White Ape shook his head. "I really didn't see that." Without waiting for Qin Yu to feel awkward, he continued to say, "I also know a little about the Ice Soul Jade Bed. Perhaps it will be useful. You can go participate in the grand competition and leave this bastard here. I will stabilize its condition and give it some more tempering so that it doesn't lose face when it goes out in the future." With just these words, Qin Yu could feel the deep cruelty of the autumn wind sweeping away fallen leaves. He silently mourned for the chicken overlord for a second. Thinking for a moment, he said, "Senior White Ape, this island is surrounded by a great fog. How can this junior leave?" White Ape rubbed his head. "I almost forgot. You can't leave under the Great Array Formation." He plucked out a white hair and handed it to Qin Yu. "Later, go to the back of the island. There is a ship there. Take this hair with you, and you won't be trapped by the Array Formation." Qin Yu received it with both hands. "Thank you, Senior." White Ape waved his hand. "Go." Looking at Qin Yu's back, White Ape's eyes flashed. "How interesting. In this world, there are actually ancient races that exist." Qin Yu left the center of the island and hurried to find the Shuai sisters. Luckily, their luck wasn't bad and they hadn't been killed off by the other hunters on the island. Holding one in each hand, Qin Yu determined his bearings and then hurried towards where White Ape had said the ship was located. This island was extremely large and ancient trees blotted out the skies. As he passed through, Qin Yu could faintly feel a terrifying aura around him. Perhaps it was because Qin Yu had white ape's hair on him. But in the eyes of these hidden vicious creatures, he was the same as someone with a pass token. They only glanced at him before retreating. His journey was smooth. When Qin Yu crossed the island and arrived at the other side near the sea, he put down the Shui sisters and looked back at the boundless mountain forest. He subconsciously wiped the beads of sweat from his forehead. Qin Yu was certain that if he didn't have white ape's hair with him, wanting to safely cross the island was simply the ravings of an idiot. With a low groan, Shui woke up. Her complexion changed, but after she saw her surroundings and Qin Yu, she calmed down a little. Big brother Qin, Shui's shout, seemed to have affected the injuries in her body. Her face, which was already pale, became even paler with a grunt. Qin Yu turned and said, "You're awake." Shui nodded. Then she panicked. "My big sister, Qin Yu furrowed his eyebrows. "Take care of yourself first. She's fine." He walked over and poured magic power into her body, alleviating the pain from her injuries. Shui gratefully said, "Thank you, big brother Qin." Qin Yu shook his head. "Can you walk by yourself?" Just as he finished speaking, he said, "Forget it. I'll carry you." Chapter 8:15. Qin Yu thought she was feeling unwell, but after asking several questions, Shui only shook her head and her heartbeat quickened. Seeing that she seemed fine, Qin Yu thought to himself that women were truly hard to understand. He simply ignored her. A moment later, Qin Yu stood atop a large rock on the seashore. He found the ship that White Ape had spoken of, but as he carefully looked at it, he couldn't help but let out a long breath. It took him a great deal of effort to suppress the urge to ridicule it. That's right, there was a ship here, and it wasn't small at all. But Qin Yu could guarantee that it had been docked here for several hundred years, or even longer. In a situation where it hadn't been maintained, the entire ship had been soaked in seawater. A wave came crashing over, sweeping away a large chunk of rotten wood. Qin Yu's lips twitched as he saw this. Turning around, he met Shui's gaze and took a deep breath. "Looks like we'll have to stay on the island for a while." Since the ship was broken, they could just build another one. For cultivators, it was not a problem. Chopping wood, dragging it to the clearing, handling the wet wood for the next 2 days, Qin Yu busied himself at the seaside. After Shui Qingqing woke up, she actually knew some shipbuilding techniques. This caused Qin Yu to be overjoyed, and he greatly increased the speed at which he built the ship. On the 4th day, a barely symmetrical ship was anchored to the shore by ropes. Qin Yu glanced at it several times. Although there were many areas where he wasn't satisfied, this wasn't easy for a novice. Moreover, he didn't expect this ship to be used for a long time. He only wanted it to carry them away from the formation that the White Ape had mentioned. As for not relying on the ship and directly flying through the fog, in truth, Qin Yu had considered this before. But since White Ape had specifically told him that there was a ship docked here, there must be a reason. If they flew out of the fog directly, they might encounter some sort of situation. It was better not to take the risk. After making a final reinforcement and carefully inspecting everything, Qin Yu boarded the ship with the Shui sisters. They raised the sails and cut off the ropes. With the sea breeze, the ship broke through the waves and rapidly sailed away from the island. Soon, the island vanished from sight. Qin Yu picked up the White Ape's fur, and sure enough, the fog's influence on him disappeared. Even though his divine sense was still unable to travel too far away from his body, he could at least determine the direction. Since he was in a place enveloped by a formation, as long as he headed in a certain direction, he would be able to get out of this place sooner or later. Qin Yu sat cross-legged at the bow, controlling the course of the ship. He frowned, worry in his eyes. Because of the accident midway, it was already past the start time of the Beast Trainer tournament. He hoped that accident would push the competition back, otherwise it would be even more trouble. But as he thought of that terrifying White Ape, he relaxed a little. It had a deep relationship with the chicken overlord, so it shouldn't be able to watch helplessly as it died. Looking at it this way, he had suffered a calamity, and this fellow had profited from the disaster. This was the so-called harming others to benefit oneself. You had suffered a disaster, but that this fellow had benefited from this. This was he, Qin. Clearwood Ching-Ching's cheeks blushed red. She looked at Qin and hesitated for a moment. Then she said, "Big brother Qin, I will fulfill my promise. But please guarantee that you won't touch my little sister." Qin was stunned. As he looked at the shy Shui Qing in front of him, he felt dizzy for a second or two. Yu was to say, there, to himself, "Look, do, think, heart I he, to say." Across from him, Clearwood Ching revealed a panicked expression. In her eyes, Qin Yu's silence clearly represented a different meaning. Across from him, Yu Qing revealed a panicked expression. In her eyes, Qin Yu's silence clearly represented a different meaning. What is this? Why is she begging me? What did I do? Qin Yu hurriedly said, "The words I said in a moment of desperation don't count. I never took it to heart, so you should also forget about it. Get up and leave. Your injuries haven't healed yet. Don't run around. Go back to the cabin and rest." Looking at his slightly helpless and panicked back, Yu Qing's face was so red it seemed as if it would drip blood. But her eyes gradually softened. It was only now that she finally believed her little sister's words. That big brother Qin really was a good person. Because of the white ape's fur, the voyage went smoothly. They didn't encounter any monster beast attacks. 5 days later, a ray of light fell on the ship. The Shui sisters began to cry out in joy. They were out, facing the sunlight. Qin Yu smiled. Although they were still drifting on the boundless sea, after leaving the thick fog that blocked out the skies, he felt refreshed. After cheering, the Shui sisters hugged each other and cried. In a short period of time, they had experienced far too many twists and turns. If they hadn't been lucky enough to run into Qin Yu, the two of them would have died long ago. They would have been buried in the sea and become food for the fish and shrimp. Thinking of this, the two of them felt even more grateful towards Qin Yu. They glanced at him as he turned his back on them so they wouldn't feel embarrassed. The two sisters glanced at each other and nodded at the same time. The night sky was bright and the stars seemed to hang in front of them, as if they could be plucked at any moment. There was a knock on the door. Qin Yu opened his eyes. "Come in." Shui Qing and Shuya pushed open the door and walked in. "Big brother Qin." What's the matter?" Shuya stepped forwards and took out a jade box from her chest. "Big brother Qin, it was thanks to your help that we sisters were able to live to this day. There is nothing we can do to repay you, so we can only give this to you. I hope that Big brother Qin will accept it, otherwise we sisters will find it hard to rest in our hearts." Qin Yu glanced at it and suddenly said, "When you were being hunted down, was it because of this?" The Shui family sisters were startled. They clearly didn't think that Qin Yu would already know. But the more it was like this, the more it showed his character. He had already guessed that they had a treasure on them, but he had never done anything about it. Shui Qing nodded. "That's right. The reason we sisters escaped from our homes was because of the thing in this box." Qin Yu thought for a moment. He met the Shui family sisters' eyes and said, "All right, I will accept it." With his current cultivation, ordinary treasures weren't worthy in his eyes. The reason he accepted it was only to make them feel at ease so that they wouldn't think about it every day. He turned his hand and put away the jade box. Shui Qing and Shuya felt a bit lost, but also a bit relieved. After all, the reason they had fallen to their current situation was all because of this item. "Big brother Qin, we won't disturb your rest any longer. We will bid our farewells." 3 days after leaving the fog, Qin Yu and the others were lucky enough to run into a search and rescue fleet from the Starfall tribe. After confirming each other's identities, they boarded the Beast Trainer Alliance's ship. After exchanging several words and confirming that because of this accident, the competition had been postponed, Chinyu finally relaxed. Luckily, he hadn't missed it. Otherwise, this trouble would have been in vain. The three of you, will you be living together, or... Although it was a bit presumptuous to ask this, the Alliance cultivator who was responsible for this subconsciously asked as he looked at the sisters standing behind Chinyu. Chinyu said separate. The Xue family sisters shouted, "Together!" The surroundings fell silent. You could clearly see that the Alliance cultivator next to him was stunned for at least 3 seconds. Then he looked at Chinyu with envy in his eyes, as if he were worshipping a peerless master that lived in seclusion. In the end, the three of them were assigned to the same cabin. Facing the sisters, who didn't feel safe at all, Chinyu chose to back down. But none of the erotic activities that everyone imagined occurred. The cabin was extremely large. After Chinyu chose a room, he went into seclusion. 10 days later, the ship completed its search and rescue mission and brought everyone to Starfall Archipelago. The ship docked, and Chinyu stepped onto the ground. He turned and said, "Miss Xue, I still have to look for my lost companions. Let's part ways here." He nodded and left. Xue Yeye took a step forwards. She opened her mouth to say something, but was pulled back by Xue Qingqing. Xue Qingqing shook her head. "Big sister." Xue Qingqing said, "Big brother Qin saved us, and we have already given him our most precious things. Since Big brother Qin doesn't want to be too close to us, then we can consider our debts even. But that's enough. Although we don't have Big brother Qin as our backer, us sisters' talents are quite fierce. We will definitely be chosen by those with good eyesight. We might even be able to enter the tutelage of some great figure in the Alliance, and we won't need to run away anymore." Looking at her big sister's eyes, Xue Qingqing weakly agreed. The Beast Trainer Alliance had already prepared the living quarters for the participating cultivators. After Chinyu showed his identification, he was placed in a small, independent courtyard. He stood at the entrance and looked around. Although the courtyard wasn't too large, it was exquisitely built, and the decorations could be considered meticulous. For them to put so much effort into a residential area that was only temporarily used, it could be seen just how rich and generous the Beast Trainer Alliance was. Chinyu inwardly praised. Then, as if sensing something, he turned his head to look behind him. On the stone path in front of the courtyard, there were several cultivators walking toward them. The one surrounded by the crowd was an elegant, middle-aged man. Judging from the fawning expressions of the people around him, he shouldn't be a simple person. Their eyes met. The middle-aged man smiled and nodded. Then he looked away and whispered with the people around him as they walked away. Chinyu frowned. He had never seen this person before, but that gaze just now, before he could think any further, he heard cheers in his ears. "Teacher." Yundai threw herself into his arms, her eyes red. "I knew that nothing would happen to you." Feeling the softness of his female disciple's chest, Chinyu awkwardly coughed. He took a step back and put some distance between them. "How did you know I was here?" Senior Lin nodded, not speaking. He actually relaxed inwardly. Dorlice chuckled. "Don't hug me so tightly. There are so many people coming and going. So, little girl, you should pay attention to your image." She looked him up and down. Then she sniffed and her eyes brightened. "Chinyu, you brat, you aren't being honest. Have you been provoking other women these past few days?" Chinyu was left speechless. Did this woman have a dog's nose? She could even smell something like this. He didn't answer. He helped Yundai stand up and asked her the same question again. Yundai blushed red. She glared at Dorlice and respectfully said, "We arrived on the island several days earlier than teacher and have been asking around for news of you. When we saw your name appear on the list, we immediately came looking for you." Chinyu nodded. "It's good that everyone is fine. Moreover, the match has already been postponed, so there wasn't any delay. Senior Lin said. "We are fine, but the Beast Trainer Alliance's troubles aren't small this time." After speaking a few more words, Qin Yu learned that the Alliance had sent out a total of 8 ships to pick up people. Only 2 of them hadn't been attacked by the giant beasts. The rest had suffered heavy casualties. If something happened on the Beast Trainer Alliance's ships, they would certainly have to take responsibility. Qin Yu frowned. 6 ships had been attacked by giant beasts at the same time. In addition to their actions of towing the ships, no matter how he looked at it, there was something strange about this. Chapter 8:16. The Beast Trainer Alliance had indeed encountered a great trouble. Although they were powerful and unrivaled in the world, far too many people had died this time. Even though the cultivators that rode the Alliance ships had low statuses, that was only relative. When the number of relatives and friends of the victims reached a certain threshold, monstrous waves began to form. The Beast Trainer Alliance tried their best to appear calm, but the atmosphere on Starfall Archipelago was still incomparably solemn. Walking on the streets, one could see Alliance cultivators hurrying about with dignified expressions. This situation continued for half a month before gradually easing. It was unknown just what price the Beast Trainer Alliance had paid to quell the anger of all sides. But this had nothing to do with Qin Yu. The only thing he cared about was that the Beast Trainer Grand Competition that had been delayed for nearly 3 months was finally about to begin. The rules of the competition had already been issued. Just like in previous years, it was divided into 3 stages: preliminary, semifinals, and final. The final rankings would be determined by a unique weighting factor, and the top 10 Beast Trainers would obtain a Grandmaster Beast Trainer medal issued by the Alliance. With this medal, no matter what influence they came from, they would always welcome them with a smile. This was how it should be. Otherwise, why would everyone travel hundreds of millions of miles to gather here from all over the world just to participate in some grand competition? Of course, this shining gold medal that could last them a lifetime was only for those that didn't understand. But those that knew the truth knew that after obtaining this medal, they would have a chance to enter the Alliance's mystic realm. That was a true lucky chance. As for what a lucky chance was, only a small number of people knew. Moreover, they often kept it a secret and never spoke a single word about it. Qin, you flipped through the rules of the competition. Besides some rules and a general time schedule, there wasn't any mention of the content of the competition. Elder Lin explained, the Beast Trainer Alliance Grand Competition has always been like this. Although the competition process is the same, none of the stages are repeated. Each time, there will be a completely new topic. Qin Yu nodded. No wonder he could run into the giant spirit clan that sold information in Vast Sea City. Although their goal was to draw Dorlease over, there really was such a thing. Thinking about it, if he could obtain the topic ahead of time while everyone else was still confused, that would truly be a wonderful matter. Should he think of a way to obtain the topic ahead of time? Qin Yu's thoughts raced, and he immediately suppressed them. If the Beast Trainer Alliance couldn't even keep this a secret, then the so-called Alliance competition that gathered all the Beast Trainer powerhouses of the world would have become nothing more than a joke. How could it have continued to this day? In short, something like a question leak might really exist, but it was definitely limited to a very small circle. It was impossible for it to be sold on a large scale. Therefore, if anyone really believed in this kind of thing, then that person's brain wasn't enough. 3 days later, the preliminaries of the Alliance competition began as scheduled. After handing in the proof of identity and confirming that there was no mistake, the contestant would receive the Jade token. This thing must be kept well, as it would be used until the end of the competition. Standing on the massive square, Qin Yu swept his eyes around. He couldn't see the end of the vast crowd. This number was probably at least a few thousand people, and this was under the premise that they had been attacked by the giant beasts. If this incident had not happened, the number of people would have been even higher. It would not have been difficult for the number to exceed 10,000. If Lin King Alliance with Beast Trainers Alliance, then it there, and there. Beast Trainer. In this competition, tens of thousands of beast trainers had gathered. Moreover, these people had already been screened ahead of time, not to mention anything else. Just the rallying power of the Beast Trainer Alliance was amazing. Fellow beast trainers, please follow the instructions on your participation Jade tokens to the arena of the preliminaries. Do not disturb the order of the competition. Otherwise, you will be stripped of your qualifications to participate. I thank everyone for your cooperation. On the high platform, an Alliance elder gave a brief speech. He waved his hand, indicating that the preliminaries had begun. The vast crowd of several thousand people divided into 4 teams that went in 4 different directions. Qin Yu was in the team that went south. Besides the sound of footsteps, he couldn't hear anything else. Everyone had dignified expressions. They were constantly guessing what the topic of the first preliminaries would be. Soon, the team left the Alliance City. There was actually a large ship already waiting at the seaside. They were going out to sea. Many beast trainers revealed hesitant expressions. Whether or not they had been besieged by the great beasts, it hadn't been too long since that happened. As they thought of those unlucky fellows that had died, they certainly felt uncomfortable. The first preliminaries will be held on another island. I ask all beast trainers to rest assured that we have already set up strict defenses. There will not be any problems. Of course, if there is a beast trainer that doesn't wish to take risks, you may choose to withdraw. The Alliance will not force you. Withdrawing from the competition was impossible. Since things had come to this, they might as well hurry up and board the ship. Qin Yu leaned against the railing of the ship. He looked down and could see the rapidly moving ship and the turbulent waters that separated it. Around 2 hours later, the ship docked next to a small island. It was clear that it had been artificially developed recently. On the side of the newly built road, there were some broken branches and leaves that glowed with green. Since they had come, when they were asked to disembark, no one hesitated. They followed the Alliance cultivators along the road and soon arrived at a mountain valley. As everyone saw this mountain valley, their eyes widened. They couldn't help but think, just what sort of trick was the Beast Trainer Alliance playing this time? As far as the eye could see, the mountain valley was dozens of miles wide and filled with monster beasts. There were giant crocodiles that weaved through the swamps, divine eagles that soared low in the air, and even a strange black wolf. Its body was over 10 meters long, and its fur seemed to be dyed with ink. Beneath the sunlight, it shimmered with a strange halo. But there were even more monster beasts with weak auras. For instance, golden chickens, leopard cats, 3-foot-tall rabbits, and so forth. But what was strange was that even though these monster beasts had different strengths and different tastes, there actually wasn't any bloodshed. All of the monster beasts stopped in their own range of activity. As they looked at the beast trainers arriving from outside the mountain valley, their eyes were either filled with fear or they had cold and callous expressions. Fellow beast trainers, the topic of the first preliminaries of the Alliance competition is affinity. Without using any strength, if you can obtain the approval of the monster beasts in this mountain valley within 4 hours, then you will pass the test. According to how long it takes for you to obtain approval and the strength of the monster beasts you choose, we will arrange your ranking. Of course, if there are any beast trainers that are worried about fairness, we can provide a chance to switch venues. 10 miles in this direction is another competition venue. After waiting for a moment, besides a pale-faced female cultivator who raised her hand and requested to switch venues, no one had any objections. Qin Yu followed the female cultivator's gaze and saw a surprisingly talented mouse in the mountain valley. This mouse was over 2 feet long, and he was left speechless for 3 or 4 seconds. As a beast trainer, he normally dealt with all sorts of fierce monster beasts and even used them for experiments. Yet he was actually afraid of a mouse. The female cultivator was quickly taken away. As the Alliance cultivator presiding over the preliminaries waved his hand, an invisible array formation appeared from nothingness. The monster beasts in the mountain valley stirred restlessly. In particular, there were several great monsters with considerable strength. Their eyes flashed again and again, but They had clearly suffered a loss before. They only hesitated for a moment before giving up on the idea of rushing out and lowering their heads. Everyone, rest assured that under the cover of the array formation, no monster beast will take the initiative to attack you. But if you choose a target, then this restriction will disappear. So, I must solemnly remind everyone that it is best to act within your limits to avoid any accidents. Of course, if you encounter a danger that you cannot contend with, you can choose to ask for help. As long as you shatter the jade token on your body, you can be directly teleported out of the mountain valley. This explanation caused many nervous beast trainers to let out sighs of relief. The speed at which they entered the mountain valley increased. But there were even more people who remained calm from start to finish, their expressions filled with confidence. Qin Yu stood in the mountain valley, looking at a group of cultivators in the distance, surrounding a giant black wolf with icy eyes. He sighed inwardly. The Beast Trainer Alliance's question makers were indeed skilled. Although this seemed like a simple test, the truth was that it involved many different areas. For instance, it was a test of eyesight. Although there were many fierce monster beasts in the mountain valley, no one could be sure that there weren't any great monsters hiding in the dark. Taking a step further, even if one chose a monster beast, they had to consider whether or not they had the ability to subdue it. This was another test. Moreover, looking at the current situation, if one could see a fierce monster beast, then everyone could as well. For instance, the giant black wolf that was surrounded by many people. In this sort of situation, wanting to obtain its approval was clearly an incomparably difficult matter. Then, should they try their luck on it or choose another monster beast? If they left, would they be taking advantage of others? In short, this first round of preliminaries had already shown their skill. For the Beast Trainer Alliance to have its current status, it wasn't an undeserved reputation. Qin Yu turned and walked away. He didn't choose to compete with others. There were many monster beasts in the mountain valley, and he had plenty of time. Moreover, he didn't plan on attracting too much attention during this alliance competition. He only wanted to obtain the qualifications to enter the mystic realm. Of course, the most important reason was that even if he wasted time and gained nothing in the end, Qin Yu was confident he could snatch a monster beast from someone else. The ancient race bloodline had a natural suppressive effect on all monster beasts in this world. But this wasn't within the scope of cheating. Thus, this seemingly fair and high-standard examination was meaningless from the start when placed on Qin Yu. Most people were already busy communicating with the monster beasts, using all sorts of methods. Qin Yu even saw a brother kneeling on the ground, his mouth humming as he tried to communicate with a thick black wild boar. As for the thick black boar, it was clearly confused. It sniffed the air, but it couldn't figure out why this fellow who didn't look like it at all smelled the same as its fellow clansmen. Qin Yu was also curious. Then he saw this brother take out a jade bottle from his chest and pour something on himself, suppressing his disgust. After sniffing from afar, Qin Yu turned and walked away. He admired this brother to the extreme. It was rare to see someone so ruthless to themselves. As everyone was busy, there were also some people wandering around the mountain valley. Besides an extremely small number of people who didn't have any confidence in themselves, most of them were confident in themselves. Of course, this didn't rule out the possibility that some people were too arrogant and overestimated their own strength. Qin Yu saw a cultivator who had been slapped by an unremarkable gray monkey. The cultivator had blood spurting out of his nose and mouth as he screamed miserably and shattered his jade tablet. Of course, this didn't scare anyone away. Instead, in the blink of an eye, 4 or 5 people surrounded the monkey. They looked up and down at the monkey with burning eyes. Hey, Little Red. I'll call you Little Red, okay? Nod your head. Even if you call me once, that can be considered a response. Don't be so arrogant. Look at how others don't even look at you. Only I think we are fated to meet. You're really not going to respond. If you continue like this, I'm going to leave. Let me tell you, if I leave, no one will look at you again. At that time, you won't be able to leave this mountain valley cage. Don't regret it at that time. As soon as she finished speaking, the not-so-tall girl in red clothes heard the footsteps behind her. Sure enough, she immediately saw a trace of ridicule flash in the eyes of this silly-looking little red bird. Su Hongyi's face fell. She turned around and glared fiercely at Qin. She clenched her small, white canine teeth and said, "There are plenty of monster beasts in this mountain valley. Why are you standing here?" Qin had a calm expression. "The competition's rules don't say that I can't be here. You." Su Hongyi was so angry that her teeth itched. But looking at Qin calm demeanor, she knew that he wasn't easy to deal with. She took a deep breath and turned her head away. She couldn't waste any more time on him. Little Red. She tried to curry favor with the red bird again, but she didn't know if it was because Qin was here, but the red bird became even more arrogant and didn't even look in her direction. On top of that, Su Hongyi could clearly feel the interested gaze that was directed at her from behind. She was getting more and more impatient. "What are you looking at? Have you never seen a beautiful woman before? You pervert!" With a shrill scream, Su Hongyi turned and walked away. Qin was expressionless, not caring about her attitude at all. He looked at the red bird and stood there in silence. Then he suddenly reached out a hand and said, "Come with me." The red bird tilted its head as if it were sizing him up. Then it flapped its wings and landed on Qin shoulder. After leaving, Su Hongyi, who had been watching from the corner of her eyes, nearly exploded with anger as she saw this. She was beautiful, had a sweet mouth, and had a good temperament. In every way, she was better than this vulgar man, and yet the little red bird had chosen him. "You smelly blind bird, you will regret this in the future. And also that vulgar man. The two of us have formed enmity today." Qin wasn't in a hurry to leave. After waiting for a moment, he left the mountain valley with the red bird. And at this time there were already 7 or 8 participating cultivators standing in front of them, all of them smiling. One of them was a white-faced beast trainer. Beside him stood a handsome gray wolf. Although it was much worse than the pitch-black wolf king, it was still an impressive aura. This person had an arrogant expression and couldn't suppress the joy in his eyes. It was clear he had obtained a good result. As Qin walked over, several people's eyes gathered on him, but after a brief pause, they all looked away. 2 of them couldn't help but sneer. In their opinion, Qin wasn't slow at all. If he had chosen such a weak red bird, what use was there in doing so? Even if he passed the preliminaries, he was doomed to be at the bottom with no chance of rising up. The Alliance cultivators were of good quality. They didn't reveal the least bit of contempt because of the red bird on Qin shoulder. After examining Qin participation jade token, they smiled and said, "Congratulations to fellow Taoist Qin for smoothly passing the preliminaries. Please allow us to appraise the red bird on your shoulder." Qin nodded. With a flick of his shoulder, the red bird flew out and drilled into the birdcage across from him. Immediately, Alliance cultivators carried it away. "Fellow Taoist, please wait a moment." As Qin retreated to the side and waited, several more cultivators walked out of the mountain valley. As they swept their eyes over Qin and the others that came out first, their expressions were a bit unfriendly. It seemed that these people in front of them weren't feeling too good about being overtaken by others. As the several people examined their tokens and handed over the monster beasts they had subdued, the Alliance cultivator that left with the birdcage walked over. He looked at Qin and unconsciously said with a respectful tone, "Fellow Taoist Qin, the appraisal has been completed. The final rankings will only be decided after the preliminaries are over." Seeing this, the complexions of the several participating beast trainers changed. The arrogant, pale-faced cultivator also couldn't help but look at Qin. "Qin, you didn't seem to notice any of this." He brought the red bird to the side and stood still. Then he closed his eyes and quietly waited. As more and more people left the mountain valley, the gazes on him soon disappeared. From time to time, he could hear low shouts in his ears. It was clear that some people had subdued powerful monster beasts. For hours later, the preliminaries ended. Almost all of the beast trainers that entered the Mountain Valley passed. After all, they had already passed the screening process, so their strength wouldn't be too bad. And an affinity with monster beasts was an ability that a successful beast trainer had to possess. Of course, although the chances of passing were high, the difference in strength between the monster beasts they subdued was massive. At this moment, the most eye-catching were the three people that had subdued the swamp crocodile, the flaming eagle, and the black wolf king. The auras of these three monster beasts were tyrannical. As they swept their eyes around, they were filled with arrogance and disdain. The three beast trainers that had subdued them, 2 men and 1 woman, had calm expressions. They didn't reveal the slightest bit of joy because of their results. It was clear that they came from a great background and were able to maintain their composure. As everyone was in awe and surprise, Qin Yu's eyes fell on a distant corner. There he saw a cold-faced young man. There was a small snow-white beast lying at his feet, its 2 front paws holding its head. It would occasionally look up to reveal its watery eyes, filled with apprehension and fear. It seemed that the slightest bit of movement would scare it away. As Qin Yu carefully looked around, he sighed inwardly. The Alliance tournament was truly filled with crouching tigers and hidden dragons. He definitely wasn't the only one with strength. As Qin Yu was sighing with emotion, he suddenly felt a ferocious gaze hatefully glaring at him. His eyes moved and fell on the red-clothed petite figure standing beside the cold-faced young man. Not only did she not look away, but she even made a very unsightly gesture at him. Qin Yu thought that girls these days were far too fierce. He looked away on his own initiative, so he didn't see her. Su Hongyi clenched her teeth and then moved closer to the cold-faced young man's ear and said something. The cold-faced young man looked at Qin Yu and nodded, not speaking. Chapter 817. Because there were many participants in the preliminaries, they were divided into 4 examination venues and conducted at the same time. It took some time to gather the results, and then the ranking list was announced 2 days later. There was no need to announce it. After the Beast Trainer Alliance finalized the ranking list, all participants could receive information on the ranking list through their jade tokens. In his room, Qin Yu sat down cross-legged. His eyes suddenly flashed open, and he took out a participant token. The surface of the token constantly sparkled. The results are out. He probed it with his divine sense. A moment later, Qin Yu looked up and subconsciously rubbed his chin. 89th place. Although Qin Yu had deliberately hidden his strength, in truth, this ranking was a bit beyond his expectations. He had almost fallen out of the top 100. Qin Yu's original plan was to maintain a ranking in the top 50 to ensure that he had the qualifications to participate in the final selection. The Alliance tournament was truly worthy of being called the top platform for beast trainers. Truly, powerhouses came forth in large numbers. It looked like he would have to be a bit more serious in the following matches. If he failed, that would be a great joke. If he walked the low-key route and ended up leaving himself out, Qin Yu wouldn't allow such a thing to happen. He looked up at the bird cage on the windowsill. Looking up at the sky, Qin Yu had a thoughtful look on his face. This fellow's ability to hide was quite good. Otherwise, even if he had deliberately delayed himself in the preliminaries, his ranking wouldn't have been so low. It was time to have a good talk with it. Qin Yu walked to the window. The red bird turned its head, its eyes incomparably calm. Little Red, tell me, what conditions do you have in order to help me obtain the qualifications to enter the mystic realm? The red bird tilted its head and looked at him. After thinking for a long time, it slowly shook its head. Qin Yu didn't think that this was because it refused to help him. Otherwise, it wouldn't have gone through so much trouble to follow him out from the mountain valley. Moreover, he wasn't someone who was easy to play with. Did it really think that it could casually walk away after boarding the boat? It was too naive. You don't know what you want. The red bird nodded. Qin Yu smiled. That's easy. Consider it as me owing you a favor. If you think of something in the future, how about it? After a moment of hesitation, the red bird agreed. After speaking, it continued to look at the sky outside the window. It had a cold and callous appearance. It was unknown what it was thinking. Qin Yu knew that it didn't yearn to fly, but was simply thinking about some matters. Ranked 89th, amongst the several thousand beast trainers here, he was considered extremely outstanding. Many people glanced over Qin Yu's name and began to secretly inquire about his background. Since the start of the Alliance tournament, the ones who were the most outstanding and eye-catching were indeed the ones who were ranked in the top 10. However, this did not mean that the others would not be able to obtain the rewards they deserved. As long as one displayed superior strength in the tournament, they would naturally attract the attention of those who were interested in them, and they would start trying to get in touch with them. Of course, the number of people paying attention to Qin Yu was much smaller than those paying attention to the top of the rankings. After the preliminaries, the most dazzling star of the Starfall Archipelago was called Luo He. It was said that this person came from the Tong province's Luo family that had fallen into desolation for tens of thousands of years. He was a beast trainer genius that only appeared once in 10,000 years. In the preliminary selections, Luo, he was allocated to the northern arena. With her sharp eyes, she managed to find a hidden four-winged white tiger. Even the Alliance was shaken. This was because the four-winged white tiger wasn't arranged by them. This further proved just how formidable Luo he was. He was actually able to discover a powerful monster beast that not even the Alliance beast trainers could find. The four-winged white tiger was a bloodline variant. It was absolutely rare in the world. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to describe it as formidable. By relying on this point, Luo he was ranked first in the preliminary selections. Even if some people weren't convinced, they couldn't say anything. The white tiger bloodline was cruel and bloodthirsty to begin with, let alone a bloodline variant. Its temper wasn't a joke. If Luo he could subdue it, this represented her strength. For a time, countless olive branches were thrown out, including those from the Beast Trainer Alliance. As long as Luo he stretched out his hand, he could obtain wealth and status that ordinary people couldn't even imagine. Many of the conditions that were privately spread out left everyone dumbfounded. But Luo he didn't agree to any of them. She only said that she would make a decision after the tournament ended. Just this point alone was enough to show his absolute confidence. At the same time, another piece of news began to spread. It was said that Luo he wanted to revitalize the Tong province's Luo family and have it prosper once more. Thus, he hoped to represent the Luo family and recruit some elite beast trainers. As this news spread out, many people revealed fervent looks. With Luo he's performance, he was absolutely a powerful character. His future was limitless. If they could hold on to such a thigh, their future prospects would be bright. In particular, on Starfall Archipelago, a large portion of the participants weren't here to compete for rankings. Rather, their main goal was to display themselves. If they could catch the fancy of some formidable beast trainer, they could obtain a chance to change their destiny. For instance, the Xue sisters who had stolen identity information to sneak into Starfall Archipelago. They had both passed the preliminaries, but their rankings were ordinary. Xue Ye swept her eyes over Qin Yu's name. She subconsciously bit her lips and looked away. Big sister, should we give it a try? Xue Qingqing thought for a moment and then slowly shook her head. There's no hurry. We'll decide after the semifinals. Xue nodded. The two sisters fell silent. They both saw Qin Yu's name. 89th place was indeed quite good. But as the two sisters thought of that figure, they unanimously agreed that he was hiding his strength. Otherwise his ranking wouldn't be so low. Originally, Qin Yu was their best choice. But what a pity, Xue Qingqing sighed inwardly. 3 days after the preliminaries, the semifinals began. Qin Yu's guess wasn't wrong. The semifinals were related to the monster beasts that everyone chose during the preliminaries. This time, the requirement was for all participants to use materials from the same storehouse to strengthen the vitality of their monster beasts as much as possible in 10 days. Rankings would be determined based on how much vitality increased and how much it increased. Regarding this, the explanation given by the Alliance was that only by living long enough could one become stronger, because life had infinite possibilities. Moreover, vitality was lifespan. This was something that no life form would ever have too much of, and it was also the most difficult thing to increase. Of course, this was reasonable. Every participant was brought into a small room that was specially divided out. Before entering, they were reminded that they absolutely could not try to cheat. This was because all the materials in the storehouse had been specially marked. Once someone secretly used other materials, they would immediately be discovered. Even so, 3 days before the semifinals began, there were still many people who chose to take the risk. It was unknown whether or not they succeeded, but there were many who failed and were stripped of their qualifications. After the 3rd day, this sort of situation began to decrease. Perhaps it was because they couldn't find any shortcuts, so they could only rely on themselves. As a fake beast trainer, Chin Yu certainly didn't know how to do something as grand as increasing one's vitality. But he at least recognized some materials that could increase one's vitality. And the storehouse provided by the Alliance was mostly filled with these materials. There were many types of materials. Of course, the extent to which they could increase one's vitality was very small, so they weren't too precious. Even so, this was still considered a great deal. Many beast trainers sighed inwardly. The Alliance was truly overflowing with wealth. If so, then things became much simpler. However, in order to prevent others from noticing anything strange, Chin Yu still took out many materials. If he placed them together, it would be an absolute mess. Luckily, many beast trainers did this. Their goal was to prevent others from secretly learning their unique skills. Thus, Chin Yu wasn't conspicuous at all. He summoned the projection of the little blue lamp to strengthen and enhance the materials sent from the storehouse. To Chin Yu, the competition was just this simple. Of course, he had to avoid the red bird. When it came to the existence of the little blue lamp, there was no room for discussion. 10 days quickly passed. Because of the accident during the preliminaries, Chin Yu wasn't sure how much he should use. In the end, the red bird made the choice for him and ate up all the strengthened materials. In any case, the red bird's ability to hide itself was quite good. Chin Yu solemnly reminded it not to show off too much. After Luo he became famous, he was stripped clean and placed under a magnifying glass to observe. With this as an example, Chin Yu didn't want to draw attention to himself. After all, his current identity was fake. It was best if people noticed him as late as possible to avoid any accidents. The Beast Trainer Alliance operated at full speed. Even so, it took a full 5 days to sort out the ranking list of the semifinals. First place, Luo He. This time, there was no doubt that he was a genius. Everyone knew that from today onwards, a shining star had truly risen. Chin Yu found his name in 63rd place. He was very satisfied with this ranking. But soon, Chin Yu encountered something that he wasn't too satisfied with. The final selections would be carried out 5 days from now. Before this, Luo, he was the most dazzling existence in the entire Starfall archipelago. Countless people tried to visit or seek an audience with her, but only a small number of people were able to achieve their goal. Dongfang Han came from a noble background, and he was ranked 4th in the semi-finals. This was more than enough to prove his formidable strength, and he naturally had the qualifications to be close to Luo He. The two of them met a few times. Dongfang Han, who had always been cold, was unexpectedly on good terms with the other party. After a while, they became friends. The 47th ranked semi-finalist, Su Hongyi, followed Dongfang Han as his younger sister. She was born beautiful, and in addition to her cute temperament, she quickly blended into the circle. The 3rd, 7th, 9th, 13th, anyone that stood out was an existence that was sought after by all. Sitting between them, Su Hongyi felt extremely good. She wasn't a particularly vain person, but then again, what kind of woman could be completely free from vanity? After another banquet, Su Hongyi separated from Dongfang Han and returned to her own courtyard. Only then did Su Hongyi regain her composure. She turned around and pounded on the opposite courtyard door. "Open up, open up. Big sister is back." The footsteps approached, and with a creak, the courtyard door opened from the inside, revealing Shui's silhouette in a black veil. She didn't even have the time to speak before she covered her chest with her hands and yelled angrily, "Su Hongyi, are you crazy now? Hee, I haven't seen you for 2 days, and it seems my beloved concubine has become even more experienced. Do you have any secret recipes to share with me?" Su Hongyi mischievously smiled as she squeezed through the crowd, scaring Shui into retreating again and again. She shouted, "My beloved concubine Qingqing, why aren't you welcoming me?" The Shui sisters who had arrived on the island had accidentally met Su Hongyi. Although they hadn't known each other for long, they had a very good relationship. If there was anything, they liked to talk about it. The two sisters didn't say much because they had something on their minds, but Su Hongyi was very carefree. For instance, during the preliminaries, she had encountered a vulgar man and told the two sisters everything. With today's experience worth bragging about, how could she possibly hold herself back? She immediately pulled the two sisters over and began to talk about it. From time to time, her fingers would intertwine in front of her, a love-struck expression on her face. Su Hongyi's strong point was that she said whatever came to her mind. She didn't give off the feeling that she was deliberately showing off. Rather, she seemed frank and sincere. The Shui sisters glanced at each other. Was there really such a coincidence? After hesitating for a moment, Shui Qingqing said, "Hongyi, I wonder if we could trouble you to introduce us sisters to Mr. Luo. Ah, that's the matter." Su Hongyi frowned. "It's fine if it's difficult." Chapter 818. Before the final selection, Qin Yu had no choice but to bring Dorlis out to relax after hearing her mumbling. The reason was that these past few days had been extremely boring. If Qin Yu didn't agree, she would use her ultimate move. Seeing this woman lean back on the bed and pull up her clothes, revealing half of her shoulders, Qin Yu's complexion paled. He stood up and left. Dorellis' smug laughter echoed from behind him. The more time they spent together, the more satisfied she became with this great puppet of hers. When the Alliance held the competition, in order to prevent a massive number of beast trainers from piling up and causing unnecessary trouble, they set up many entertainment events. As Qin Yu walked down the streets of Starfall Archipelago, there was a considerable flow of people. As Qin Yu stood to the side and waited for Dorlis to buy candy, he saw two semi-familiar figures. The reason he called them 2.5 was because two of them were the Shui family sisters. He could recognize them from their backs. As for the other one, she was wearing red clothes. He had only seen her once in the preliminaries. She was a very fierce young girl. How did these three people come together? Qin Yu saw them, but the three women didn't see him. They gathered together and whispered to each other for a moment before walking towards a club on the side of the street. On Starfall Archipelago, only those with a certain level of status could enter this sort of clubhouse that gathered entertainment and enjoyment. Su Hongyi was qualified, but if she wanted to bring others in, she wasn't qualified enough. But she had Dongfang Han's membership card on her. She flashed it at the entrance, and the Alliance cultivators guarding the entrance respectfully drew back. Qin Yu watched as the three of them entered. Just as he was about to look away, several people hurried past him and inadvertently heard their conversation. His eyebrows furrowed together. "Luo!" He, later on, Qin Yu had seen this person from afar during the semi-finals. With a single glance, he recognized that Luo he was the middle-aged man he saw on the first day he entered the island. The two of them had never met before, and this person's aura was strange. But For some unknown reason, Chinyu had a bad feeling about this person. Or, it was more accurate to say that if this person brought his handsome face closer to him, Chinyu would have ruthlessly slapped him. There was no reason. It was just pure dislike and disgust. Several people had said that Luo He and the other outstanding characters of the competition would be holding a banquet in this club. Now that the Shui sisters had gone in, could it be because of him? With the information he had, the more he thought about it, the more likely it seemed. For better or worse, they had known each other for some time and had gone through trials and tribulations together. The sisters even called him Big Brother Chin, so should he remind them? But that day he looked as if he was afraid that others would get involved with him and hurriedly took his leave. What was he trying to do now? As Chinyu was hesitating, someone patted his shoulder. Hey, you have to be careful when looking at beauties. Your eyeballs are about to pop out. Dorlise licked the candy and looked at him with an amused expression. Chinyu glared at her. If you're done buying, then leave. How old are you? You're still eating this kind of thing. I'm happy. Why do you care? Dorlise sneered. Her eyes turned and she suddenly said, I'm tired from walking. I want to rest. Let's go there. After saying that, he walked straight ahead. Yundai was also holding a candy figurine in her hand. As she heard Chinyu's words, she didn't know whether to eat it or throw it away. Her heart was in a dilemma. Chinyu glanced at her. Eat it. He turned and followed behind. Looking at Dorelisa's back, he wasn't sure if she had noticed something or if it was just an accident. Without surprise, Dorlise was stopped in front of the clubhouse. Although her beauty made one's legs go weak, the several Alliance cultivators guarding the door didn't dare to let her in because of this. That was a joke with their jobs. Dorlise turned her head in embarrassment. She angrily said, Chinyu, hurry and let me in. The gatekeeper's eyes brightened. Are you Mr. Chinyu, the 89th place finalist? Seeing Chinyu nod, the gatekeeper smiled. Mr. Chin, are you here to participate in the banquet hosted by Mr. Luo He on the 8th floor? If so, you can go in and speak with Mr. Luo He. Then you can bring in all of your companions. His words were polite, but as he thought about it, the truth was that besides Chinyu, no one else here had the qualifications to enter. Chinyu shrugged. You see, I can't bring anyone in. Let's go. Dorlise clenched her teeth. No, I want to go in. Chinyu, think of a way. Standing on the side, the silent old Lin suddenly said, I have a way. He took out a card. The gatekeeper glanced at it, and his complexion immediately changed. He respectfully invited the 4 people in. After the 4 people disappeared from the entrance, the gatekeeper immediately said through an internal communication array formation, The Heaven Step card guests have arrived. Hurry and welcome them. After leaving the elevator, a female manager of the clubhouse was already waiting outside with a bright smile. I didn't know that several honored guests had arrived. I ask that you forgive me for not going out to greet you. Chinyu glanced at old Lin. He wasn't surprised by this. After all, with his status, it was only natural for him to act like this. Although she knew that old Lin would be the one holding the card, the female manager had been responsible for managing the clubhouse for many years and had long since developed a pair of fiery golden eyes. She could see that Chinyu was the core of the group, and her smile became increasingly bright. May I ask what the honored guests need today? Before Chinyu could speak, Dorlise said, I heard that there is a banquet being held on the 8th floor. Can we go? The female manager looked at her, and her heart chilled. She suddenly discovered that her eyesight needed some time to improve. From Dorelisa's actions, she could see that she was absolutely a top character. The free and easy temperament she exuded was absolutely impossible to fake. She respectfully said, Reporting to Mr. Luoha and the others are holding a banquet on the 8th floor. Their original intention was to meet friends from all over. Several groups of guests have already gone to join in on the fun. If the 4 of you go, you will definitely be welcomed. Then let's go to the 8th floor. Seeing Chinyu's calm expression, the female manager respectfully said, "All right." She personally led the way. After entering the elevator, the four people arrived outside the banquet hall on the 8th floor. There were several guards standing at the entrance. Seeing that their big sister was leading the way, they didn't dare to say a single word. They respectfully bowed and let them through. The banquet hall was very large, and they adopted an open buffet style. Dorelis's eyes shined as she ran towards the long dining table. Hyundai gulped. She swept her eyes around the venue and couldn't help but secretly click her tongue at today's banquet. She had only heard of many of the ingredients on the table. Only old Lin had a calm expression, as if he weren't surprised at all. He didn't say anything at all. Chin glanced at Hyundai. "Take whatever you want to eat. In any case, you don't need to pay, so don't be polite." Hyundai awkwardly smiled. In the end, she couldn't resist the temptation of delicious food. She picked up the tray and walked away, her eyes bright. Chin picked up a cup of wine and took a small sip. The taste wasn't bad. Then he casually found a corner and stood there. "Old Lin, your actions today were a bit careless." The Chin family's nameless bastard son was actually together with someone with an astral fate society card. As long as someone noticed this, they would definitely be suspicious. Old Lin had a calm expression. "It's fine. With your current status, you have the qualifications to be won over by others. It's fine if you occasionally step out of line." After a pause, he continued to say, "Moreover, even if someone really investigates, they won't find anything, because this card is fake." Chin nearly spat out the wine in his mouth. He had thought of countless possibilities, but he never expected this to be the result. He looked at the wine in his hand and then at Dorlis and Hyundai, who were happily eating. Was this considered cheating others to eat and drink? If this was discovered, would he still have the face to continue participating in the competition? Old Lin said, "Don't worry, there won't be any problems with the card. I will find a place to sit down. You don't need to worry about me." "Don't need to worry about me?" It seemed that the look in his eyes had already been noticed. Whatever, if they saw, then they saw. Chin picked up his cup of wine. He swept his eyes around and found the Shui sisters, who had arrived first. They really were here. In these past days, Luo he had already encountered many people who hoped to approach him through connections. As long as their recommendation was sufficient, he would meet with most of them. So when Dongfang Han mentioned it, he smiled and agreed. He originally only wanted to give Dongfang Han some face, but he never imagined that he would be incomparably satisfied. He could not be satisfied. Just smelling the scent of the Shui sisters caused his heartbeat to quicken. Luck. This was definitely luck. This was an unexpected harvest. Luo, he didn't pretend to be reserved. Instead, he raised a cup of wine to the two sisters and smiled. "Today, I welcome you two to join us. From now on, we are one family." Su Hongyi had heard Dongfang Han mention that Luo he had extremely high standards. She never imagined that things would go so smoothly. She immediately smiled and pushed Shui Qingqing. "Beloved concubine, how will you thank me for this?" Shui Qingqing blushed. She glared at her and stood up with her little sister. "Then from now on, I'll have to ask Mr. Luo he to take care of me." Before the two sides could finish their cups of wine, they were interrupted by a sudden commotion. Luo he, who was in a good mood, frowned. What happened? Two brightly dressed youths with pale faces were lying on the ground, clutching their genitals and howling in pain. Looking at their trembling bodies, one could imagine how heavy the attack just now had been. Many men subconsciously felt their hearts turn cold and they shrunk back. Across from them, Dorlis placed her hands on her hips and cursed. "You two bastards, you actually dared to drug me. Are you looking to die?" Hearing these words, everyone's complexions changed. In particular, the several extraordinary individuals that participated in the banquet all had gloomy expressions. The reason they came to this banquet was mainly to communicate with each other and expand their networks. If news of someone drugging a woman were to spread, what would happen to their reputation? Even if this had nothing to do with them, they would still be tainted with the smell of sex. Qin Yu put down his wine cup. He passed through the crowd and walked to Dorella's side. He whispered, "What kind of demon are you playing at this time?" She turned her head and moved closer to his ear. Dorlise whispered, "You have no conscience. They were drugged, and you don't care at all?" Qin Yu was expressionless. "I think the ones I should be more concerned about are those two brothers on the ground. Don't try to act innocent after taking advantage of them. I've already given you a chance. Whether or not you want to interfere is up to you." Dorlise wiped her eyes and hugged Qin Yu. "Qin Yu, you have to uphold justice for me." With a few words, she pushed all the blame away. As Qin Yu looked at the sobbing and crying Dorlise, he was left speechless for a second. Then he discovered that everyone's eyes were on him. Shui Yeye's heart trembled. Just as she was about to say something, she was pulled back by Shui Qingqing, who gently shook her head. A man passed through the crowd and arrived in front of the two people on the ground. As he looked at their condition, his complexion became increasingly ugly. He turned to Qin Yu. "Who are you? Why have you appeared here?" Qin Yu looked at him, his expression calm. "Who are you? You don't know me? Then listen well, my name is Xia Gong." With a callous expression, he pointed at the two people on the ground. "These two are my friends. I can guarantee that with their backgrounds, they would never do anything that would damage their reputation." Xia Gong's eyes were icy cold. "I'm warning you, don't try to disturb the banquet. Otherwise you won't be able to bear the consequences." The banquet hall was silent. Those who had the qualifications to speak didn't know what the truth was. But Xia Gong's current actions were clearly in line with their interests. Feeling this silence, Xia Gong's confidence increased. He looked at Qin Yu as if he were looking at grass. "Speak. You deliberately tried to frame me and stir up trouble. What is your goal?" His words suddenly changed. Qin Yu looked at him, his face expressionless. "Are you so sure that I can't provoke you?" Xia Gong sneered. "In the semifinals, you are ranked 89th. Qin Yu, you do have some capital, but I am ranked 16th. Immediately apologize to my friend and leave with this woman. Otherwise, I guarantee you will regret it." He just so happened to have some information on Qin Yu. After glancing at it and hearing Dorellis's words, he had already recognized Qin Yu. If it weren't for this, how could he act so impulsively in this sort of banquet? 16th against 89th. Of course, he would be crushed in all aspects. As for the tiny Qin family, with his background, he didn't need to worry about them. As Luo he saw Qin Yu, his eyebrows furrowed imperceptibly. Then he composed himself and said, "Those that can come to the 8th floor are my guests. There must be some misunderstanding here. Mr. Xia Gong, please give me some face and don't pursue this any further." Xia Gong sneered. "Consider yourself lucky." He turned and cupped his hands together. "Since Mr. Luo He has spoken, I will naturally comply." Qin Yu looked up and met Luo He's eyes. After a brief pause, he pulled Dorlise and turned to leave. Everyone's eyes revealed a playful light. They thought that his words just now were quite imposing, but it turned out he was just a wax spear. However, in this sort of situation, it was normal for him to lower his head. After all, this was only the 89th semifinal. In front of Xia Gong, he wasn't even worth mentioning. Yun Dai gloomily walked over to Qin Yu's side. She was a bit angry, but when she remembered that her teacher had told her to keep a low profile, she could only reluctantly endure it. Dorlise didn't resist. She wiped away her teary eyes and whispered in Qin Yu's ear, "Are you really going to leave like this? How shameful!" Qin Yu ignored her. When they arrived at the entrance of the banquet hall, he suddenly stopped and turned. He looked at the Shui family sisters and asked, "You two don't want to leave together?" Shui Qingqing and Shuya were stunned for a moment, but they soon responded. Without hesitation, they stood up and placed down their wine glasses. They bowed to Luo He and then quickly crossed the banquet hall to Qin Yu's side. Everyone was dumbfounded. They watched helplessly as the group of 6 left, their hearts in chaos. Luo he was expressionless, her fists clenched and loosened within her sleeves, but in the end she didn't say anything to stop them. Now wasn't the time. From the moment Su Hongyi recognized Qinyu, she had been excited. When Luo he had stepped forward to stop Xiaogong, she had been disappointed for a long time. She had thought that seeing this vulgar man slip away would be enough to vent her anger. But who would have thought that the situation would suddenly reverse? Looking at the backs of the Xue family sisters, her lips moved, but no sound came out. Chapter 819. In front of everyone, Qin Yu had brought the Xue family sisters away. This had nearly caused Luo he to lose all face, and he began to have a headache. He felt that he was a bit too soft-hearted. They were just strangers that had met by chance, so why did he have to make things difficult for himself? Disregarding whether or not his performance today would arouse the suspicions of others. Just how could Qin Yu deal with the Xue family sisters that were following him? You can't just turn around and leave them to fend for themselves just because you said you'd bring them along. Qin Yu took a deep breath and stopped. The people behind him seemed to know what he was going to do, and they all stopped in unison. Senior Lin glanced at Qin Yu. His eyes flashed for a moment before he composed himself. But Qin Yu knew that this old fellow who didn't reveal his emotions must have some opinions about him. For instance, his luck with women, or something like that. Yun Dai tried her best to remain calm and composed, but she couldn't conceal the sadness in her eyes. She had an expression that said, "How can teacher do this?" Dorelis's mocking smile hung on her face without any attempt to hide it. She glanced at Qin Yu, as if saying, "Let's see how you'll continue pretending in the future." Qin Yu felt an even greater headache. He rubbed his temples, ignoring their expressions. He thought that he was just doing what he wanted, so he didn't care about their random thoughts. His eyes fell on the Xue family sisters. Qin Yu thought for a moment and slowly said, "This Luo he isn't as simple as he seems on the surface. If you follow him, I fear there will be problems." He had called them out with just a few words and ruined their good fortune. Disregarding everything else, this explanation was necessary. But this explanation was a bit too far-fetched. Without any evidence, did he think there was a problem just because he thought there was? But unexpectedly, the Xue family sisters didn't say anything. They nodded and believed him. Senior Lin's eyes flashed, and Yun Dai became even more grieved. Dorelis's taunting skills were fully activated. Qin Yu was left speechless. Why were the two of them so easy to talk to? At least ask a few questions. But now it was even harder to explain himself. But in the end, it was because the two sisters trusted him that he did this. Could he blame them? Qin Yu rubbed his nose and coughed. But as he saw the Xue family sisters' expectant eyes, he couldn't bring himself to speak. After thinking about it again and again, he sighed in his heart. "I don't know what problems the two of you have encountered, but even if you want to find a backer, you have to make a clear judgment. You can't be impatient and blindly rush. For now, you can stay on the island with peace of mind. If there are any problems, we can talk about it after the competition. How about it?" Shueya blurted out, "Okay." Her eyes sparkled. If it weren't for her big sister holding her back, she would have thrown herself into Qin Yu's arms. Clearwood, Qing respectfully bowed. "Big brother Qin, our residence is at the East District's 37th courtyard. You can ask around and you'll be able to find it. Us sisters won't be going out any time soon. We wish Big Brother Qin a good result in the final selection." After he finished speaking, he pulled the reluctant Shueya away. Even a blind man could smell her reluctance to part with him. She kept looking back until they disappeared, and even a blind man could smell her reluctance. "Big Brother Qin, TSK, HSK. This form of address is so sweet that it makes it difficult for one to breathe." Dorlis patted Qin Yu's shoulder. "Be honest. Just what did you do to those sisters that they are so docile and obedient? You have the final say in everything." Qin Yu was expressionless. He simply explained the process of how he met the Shui family sisters. He didn't give Dorlise a chance to continue pestering him and laugh at him. He looked straight at her and said, "Me interfering in this matter can barely be considered helping an old friend. But what about you? Don't tell me you just wanted to watch the fun and cooperated with me to put on such a show." Elder Lin's eyes narrowed. He was also incomparably curious about this point. Dorlise was unexpectedly honest. She shrugged and said, "It's simple. You don't think that Luo he is right. I also don't like him." She frowned as if she were preparing her words. Then she continued to say, "That person has an imposing appearance and a good appearance. His gentle smile is very charming, but I just feel that something is wrong with him. If I wasn't sure that I've never met his aura before, I would have thought that this fellow was an enemy of mine who had changed his appearance to deal with me." This statement sounded ridiculous, but Qin Yu immediately believed it. This was because he also had the same feeling. Although he thought this, he didn't reveal anything on his face. He glanced at Dorlise, noncommittal, and then turned to leave. "I've been out long enough. Let's go back." It was only after he was far away that Dorlise regained her composure. That slippery Qin Yu had led the conversation astray again. She still hadn't figured out his relationship with those two young beauties. "Stop! Don't run!" Without looking back, Qin Yu quickened his steps as he heard this. The final selections arrived as scheduled. This time, those that had the qualifications to participate were only those ranked in the top 100 of the semifinals. The number of people had sharply decreased, and there was no longer the oppressive feeling of endless darkness. But the attention paid to the final selections didn't decrease because of the decrease in numbers. Rather, it reached an unprecedented peak. Whether it was the Beast Trainer Alliance or the cultivators that came from all over, they were all waiting for the final victor to appear. The 100 final selections participants stood in the square, listening to the Alliance elder explain the rules. Because of the array formation, his voice was clearly transmitted into everyone's ears. In this final selections, we will use a disorderly competition method. The jade tokens that were returned to you just now have been modified. After you enter the final selection arena, no matter what method you use, as long as you can defeat 9 opponents and seize their jade tokens and maintain this until the end of the competition, you can become one of the top 10 participants of the competition. Of course, each person can only possess 10 jade tokens at the same time. Once you complete the competition, you cannot obtain any more. Here, I would like to remind everyone that there are certain risks in the final selection arena. If you feel that you cannot cope, it is best to withdraw as soon as possible. As long as you shout to the skies that you withdraw from the competition, you will immediately be transferred out to avoid unnecessary injuries. As Qin Yu was listening carefully, he frowned and turned to the side. Several people away, Su Hongyi's eyes met his. The moment their eyes met, she wrinkled her nose and lightly humphed. She turned her head away, a look of disdain on her face. Beside her, Dong Fenghan frowned. As he looked at Qin Yu, there was a bit of coldness in his eyes. Qin Yu didn't care about any of this. His eyes fell on Luohi. His intuition told him that this person knew he was looking at her. But from start to finish, Luohi's eyes remained closed, not expressing anything at all. Disdain? Qin Yu didn't think so. Perhaps this person didn't want his thoughts to be seen through his eyes. Thinking back to what Dorlise had said about how she found Luohi displeasing to the eye, Qin Yu expressionlessly looked away. A bit of coldness surged in his heart. It would be best if they could live in harmony. He didn't want to provoke trouble. Otherwise, he would take this chance to figure out just where this hostility towards Luohi came from. As Qin Yu's thoughts raced, the Alliance Elder's words reached the end. The final selections have begun. I wish everyone a good result. In the square, a giant array formation opened. A strong light erupted, causing space to twist. According to the guidance of the Alliance cultivators, The 100 final selections cultivators stepped into the array formation one after another. Their figures twisted and they vanished from sight. Qin Yu had a calm expression. The tearing strength around him had no effect on him at all. After a moment, when everything calmed down and he opened his eyes, he discovered that he was in a cave. He wasn't too far from the entrance of the cave. He could see a weak light sprinkling in from the outside. Qin Yu swept his divine sense around. After determining that there wasn't anything wrong, he flew out from the cave. Rumble, rumble. The light suddenly brightened. A sea breeze blew against his face, carrying with it a slightly salty smell. A massive wave crashed into the cliff, smashing into it. Looking down, he could see that the mountain was 100,000 feet high. All he could see was black seawater. A giant seabird spread its wings in the wind, its sharp eyes suddenly locking onto Qin Yu. Perhaps to this seabird, Qin Yu, who had suddenly emerged from the cave, was no different from a large fish in the sea. He was food that it could hunt, but unfortunately it had chosen the wrong target today. Qin Yu lifted his hand, his fingers spreading apart. A formidable strength gushed out from the air, wrapping around the seabird like an invisible swamp. Its eyes revealed fear. It struggled with all its might and cried out, but it couldn't escape. With a step, Qin Yu landed on its back. He lifted it up and the seabird wailed. It flapped its wings and flew upwards. Who? The seabird carried Qin Yu on its back. At a nearly straight angle, it stuck close to the cliff and held out. But at this time, Qin Yu, who was sitting on the seabird's back, retreated like a bolt of lightning. In the next moment, a black shadow rushed forwards and bit off the seabird's neck. It didn't even have time to cry out before it died where it stood. The one that had bitten the seabird to death was a monster beast shaped like a cheetah. It had 2 tails and a pair of dark yellow eyes. It glared at Qin Yu and made threatening noises. Qin Yu remained expressionless. He allowed the monster beast to drag the seabird's corpse away, leaving behind a trail of blood on the ground as it vanished from sight. However, it was clear that the fresh smell of blood had attracted other hunters. It wouldn't be easy for this cheetah monster beast to swallow up all the food for itself. In the thick mountain forest, there was a sudden roar, followed by a loud explosion. Standing on the edge of the cliff, Qin Yu could clearly feel the ground beneath him trembling. The struggle didn't continue for too long before it ended. Without surprise, the seabird had been cleanly eaten. In the shadows of the mountain forest, giant eyes appeared, cold and cruel as they locked onto Qin Yu. But in the end, not a single monster beast rushed out. After a brief standoff, they all retreated deep into the forest. Qin Yu frowned. This was the Alliance's final selection field, and there didn't seem to be anything related to beast trainers. Was this a competition of cultivation? Compared to the exquisiteness and depth of the preliminaries and semifinals, it seemed a bit too crude. Whatever, there was no point in thinking so much. Since the rules of the competition had been set, he should hurry up and think of a way to obtain the 9 participation tokens. Shwa! His figure flashed, and Qin Yu drilled into the forest, vanishing from sight. Starfall Archipelago. As the participants of the final selection entered the competition field, a high-level alliance conference was being held. Besides the several elders presiding over the opening ceremony, all the high-level alliance figures were present. In the grand and magnificent conference hall of the alliance, the dome of the heavens was propped up by giant stone pillars. There was a round gap in the middle that allowed light to shine in, falling onto the round platform in the center of the hall. All the high-level alliance figures participating in the conference were bathed in this light. Every minute expression on their faces was clearly illuminated. The one presiding over the conference was the current president of the alliance, a legendary existence amongst beast trainers, Biggie Douglas. This was a formidable existence with a variation bloodline. He had a head of brilliant golden hair that burned like golden flames beneath the sunlight. Everyone, the reason the Alliance is holding an emergency meeting today is to respond to the recent internal disputes. I admit that there is a certain amount of risk in the final selection's battlefield arrangements. Perhaps some of our outstanding beast trainers will be injured. But I must remind everyone that this is a choice we must make in a situation where we have no other choice. That being in the sea has already taken action. We cannot determine whether or not it has other methods. Even if we have to pay a certain price, we must eliminate all dangers. Douglas's calm voice echoed through the conference hall. His voice was calm and dignified, but also carried with it an unquestionable strength. After a long period of silence, an Alliance elder said, "The final selection has already begun. Isn't it too late for Sir President to hold a meeting now?" Douglas replied in a deep voice, "Yes." He looked around and took in everyone's expressions. Convening the Alliance's meeting at this moment was a decision made by me and the other vice presidents. If anyone has any objections, they can follow the Alliance's procedures to impeach us. For this matter and all the consequences it may cause, I, Biggie Douglas, along with the several vice presidents, are willing to bear all responsibility. The 3 vice presidents stood up at the same time. They said in a low voice, "We are willing to bear all responsibility." Qin Yu obtained the first participant token. His opponent was ranked 39th in the semifinals. The moment this person saw Qin Yu, he revealed an excited expression. It was clear he had already investigated the final selection list ahead of time. However, 39's excitement only lasted for 3 breaths of time. His eyes widened, turning into shock and unwillingness. The 2 monster beasts that this person summoned instantly died on the spot. When Qin Yu approached him with a bloody aura, 39 didn't even have time to respond before he was knocked unconscious by a single punch. After taking the participant token, the space around 39 slightly twisted. His figure vanished as he was transmitted away. Contrary to Qin Yu's expectations, after this token entered his hand, it turned into powder. As for his original token, 2 dots of light appeared. After looking at it several times, Qin Yu put away the token. Then he looked at the 2 monster beasts that had been killed on the spot, a thoughtful look in his eyes. He tried to summon the purple-back blue-wing ants in the competition field. In other words, these 2 monster beasts were subdued by 39 after he entered the competition field. Qin Yu felt that he had grasped the key to the final selection. Although he hadn't been here for too long, he had encountered an astonishing number of monster beasts along the way. There were even some tyrannical existences among them. If a powerful beast trainer was given enough time, even if they were alone, they could quickly raise a formidable monster beast army. The smell of blood wafted through the air. It would soon attract hungry hunters. Qin Yu's thoughts raced several times. Then he stepped forwards and rapidly flew away. Qin Yu discovered that his 89th place result in the semifinals was quite confusing. He didn't even need to look for the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th participant tokens. They were delivered to him on their own initiative. But after he obtained the 4th token, a change occurred. Qin Yu looked down at the 5 dots of light on his participant token. As he felt the powerful aura they released, he revealed a helpless expression. As he thought, it wasn't so easy to pass the final selection. As the number of tokens increased, the tokens themselves would release a powerful aura that could be sensed. In the eyes of the other participants, it was like a torch in the darkness. Once they sensed Qin Yu approaching, they would often flee from far away, not giving him a chance to attack. Moreover, from another perspective, as the number of tokens increased, the aura of the tokens would become increasingly strong. At that time, they would definitely become the target of everyone. After all, as long as everyone joined forces to kill one, they would be able to gather 10 tokens. As Qin Yu was frowning, his complexion suddenly changed. He looked up in front of him. He could sense another powerful aura. When Qin Yu sensed the other party also sensed him. After a brief pause, they hurried over. Narrowing his eyes, Qin Yu moved forwards to meet the other party. The distance between them rapidly shortened. Schwa,